right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Welcome if you are new. Thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate that. And I also want to thank you guys for waiting patiently as the credits roll. I want to give a big shout out right off the bat. We have nearly 300. We actually have over 350 people here already. So thank you guys for that. Really appreciate that type of support. Hit that like button. Saying rant incoming. Rant incoming. I don't know. We'll see if a rant happens today or not. I'm not sure. But yeah, appreciate you guys being here. We are going to be talking about something that has seemingly went way under the radar. And this to me is something that it may not be. I think to a lot of people, it's not going to be the most relevant thing right now. And I won't deny that. It's not the most relevant thing right now. But as we go into 2024, especially as we get to the middle of 2024, and especially after a game like Starfield comes out, it's going to be, I think, pretty relevant. And it's not just Starfield, but many other games. I don't know if I can count Spider-Man 2 in this conversation. You'll know what I'm talking about in a minute. MBG, oh no, it's Alex, featured you as he was reacting to the Xbox Showcase reactions. You gotta love it, dude. I'll be honest, man. Like, I find it humorous, also a little bit flattering that there are people out there, man, where like they rely on others for their own content, and if they didn't have that, they wouldn't have their own content. There would be nothing. Like, these people who do this stuff, like, you come to me. You come to me. I appreciate that. So it is what it is. If people like that, if that's how, people want to run their shit, then run your shit, bro. Who am I to say? I got a couple super chats here from New Soul 9. Saying don't disrespect the himbo. No, it's no disrespect, man. I'm just saying it's funny. Like it's to me I don't know if there's the awareness there. You know what I mean? Like, I'll be honest, I don't really know who that is. People come here all the time naming people that I've just never heard of, or like, oh, did you see this person? Like, no, I didn't see it. Like, why would I pay attention to people who are using me for their content? Like, what am I going to get from that? Like, oh, yeah, look at what I said. Look at what I did. Like, yeah, I was there. But if you're talking about, like, in terms of like beefing with people, like, dude, I don't care. Like, shit on me all you want, talk shit, make fun, clown on me. Go ahead. Do your worst. Do what you're going to do. But my only question is, if it wasn't for me and my channel and my content, what would you be doing? That's my only question. Probably, I don't know, probably looking for somebody else. But yeah, I think we have a pretty interesting topic that we're going to be discussing today. I'm sure a lot of people are curious about the title. Does MBG have a do? No, actually, I don't have a do-rag on. You know what? I didn't think about that. It's not, it does look like a do-rag, doesn't it? That's funny, man. No, it's actually my hat. I had it on backwards. I love it. So, yeah, before I dive into this topic and into this discussion, I do want to let everybody know, if you appreciate the content, please show your support. There's a couple of ways you can do that. Becoming a channel member helps tremendously. If you are already a channel member, gifting channel memberships is absolutely huge. We are growing this community. We are growing strong. We're growing rapidly. So if you are a member, please consider gifting memberships. You guys have been absolutely incredible with the support you've been showing. And on top of that, consider also donating a super chat. Super chats are tremendously helpful as well. It's a direct fan funding support, and you also get to partake directly in the conversation with me. So I really appreciate that. Am I going to stream the Xbox event in 30 minutes? No. I don't know what people are expecting. Like, look, maybe Xbox will have a little announcement or something, but this is not their showcase. It's kind of just a, you know, it's like an auxiliary thing. But no, I don't have any interest in streaming that. Saying Sony has to have a PlayStation experience this fall. So before I dive into the topic, News Soul 9, you're saying, MBG, did you hear the news after June 15th? Microsoft is attempting to close the ABK deal. Let's go. Honestly, so I did hear that, but I'm also hearing that the FTC is filing to block that. And this is going to be really interesting because I talked to you guys about how Microsoft is about to they are getting very aggressive where they're just saying, you know what? We don't care about the CMA. We don't care about the FTC. We're Microsoft. We're going in and we're closing this shit and we'll deal with the repercussions and the ramifications afterwards. I did hear that that's what Microsoft was planning to do. And the big reason they want to do this is because they're reaching the deadline. What happens if Microsoft can't close the deal before they reach the deadline? They owe Activision Blizzard $3 billion. They have to shell out $3 billion and kind of like renegotiate another deal. It's going to be a massive process, a massive headache, and a huge blow to Microsoft's bottom line if they end up having to do that. So it's understandable that Microsoft is trying to fast track the closure of this deal, but the FTC, like I said, they're filing to block that. And essentially, if the FTC gets their way here, or if they win now, I don't know. I guess it's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 to 4 weeks. But if they end up winning against Microsoft here, they will have effectively blocked Microsoft's ability to close this deal and putting Microsoft in a very bad spot. And obviously, Microsoft doesn't want that. So you're saying it's $5 billion, not 3? Really? I could have swore it was 3. If it is $5 billion, that's even worse, dude. You're saying that's not how it works. They don't have to pay the $3 billion if they extend the deal. Yeah, but I don't know. Well, I'll be honest. I don't know how I don't know how a lot of this stuff works. Many of these things, I don't know if they're able to extend the deal. You know, if they're able to just perpetually extend the deal, then why even have a deadline? I don't know. I don't know. That's all I've heard, though. What I've heard is that they're trying to force the deal through and they want to close it. And if they can't do that by the deadline, then they have to pay a shit ton of money. And New Soul 9 is saying, MBG, you're going to stream the extended showcase. Nah, honestly, no, man. I'm showcased out right now. I just want to chat with you guys. I just want to hang out. You guys, I'll rely on you guys. If they announce anything significant, you know, if the Xbox extended show that they're doing, if they announce anything significant, let me know. I do want to let you guys know, because I saw a lot of you guys freaking out about this during my stream yesterday. The Ubisoft conference, Star Wars Outlaws. So I thought you guys were exaggerating. I'll be honest with you. I thought you guys were over exaggerating like this game. I watched the 10-minute gameplay and wow. Yeah, dude, I've seen people saying this is like GTA Star Wars, the closest thing we're going to get to it. It's impressive, man. I won't lie to you. Star Wars Outlaws looks so impressive. I'm skeptical. This is Ubisoft we're talking about. I am skeptical about the final product. We've seen Ubisoft do this before, where it's like, dude, that looks a little too good. Okay. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to be proven wrong. But it's funny. I watched it on the PlayStation YouTube channel, and one of the top comments that somebody left, and it was pretty funny. It made me chuckle. They were like, suddenly PlayStation not having Starfield doesn't look so bad, or hurts a lot less, or something like that. And yeah, I obviously they're different games, you know, they're different games, but there's enough similarity that I could see why somebody would say that. But it does look good, man. Like, I was quite surprised. I will say that when it comes to Star Wars Outlaws, the biggest hurdle for me is the fact that it's Star Wars. I won't lie to you guys about that. Like, I was watching this game and I was just like, imagine if they just kept like almost everything the same, but they just decided to not make it Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like, not work within that IP, but just makes, you know what I mean? That would be really cool. I feel like I'm really getting tired of Star Wars. Um, I don't have like a big problem with it, but it feels like it's kind of like the Marvel effect a little bit, where it's like there's some things I'm always going to gravitate towards, but I don't know, man. It just some of it just starts to feel it's like it's all kind of bleeding in to each other and to one another, and you know. But yeah, it does look really 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 good. Oh yeah, and also I just found it kind of funny, like the main protagonist, the I don't know her name, the female main character. I just thought it was kind of funny that it's like, so they just decided to go with female Han Solo. You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, I get it. And this is, I think, like, that's why I start to feel a little bit tired of Star Wars, because it just feels like they just kind of keep recycling the same characters over and over and over again. And I guess, I don't know, I guess maybe for some people they like that. That's fine. Like, even if it was a dude, it would just feel like, so it's Han Solo 2.0 or something like that. You know what I mean? And I just kind of wish, I don't know, I just wish that they would be willing to just get a little bit more creative with it. And you know, I'm judging early though. Like, we only saw a snippet of gameplay. This character could be way different than Han Solo, but that's kind of the vibe I got. But then again, the star of that Star Wars Outlaws gameplay to me was just the world. Like, again, man, the level of detail and everything that was going on, and this fact it all seemed open and you just travel in the space seamlessly. I'm like, dude, something's got to give here. Something like this looks too good. I think that's a compliment, but I genuinely walked away from it thinking this simply looks too good, and I am waiting to see the final product. But yeah, looks good, man. Something else I do want to say before diving into the main topic today, because I know people are asking me about this. And actually, before I do that, Bub777, you're saying round 2 ready for more Hellblade gameplay today. Are we gonna get that? That would actually be great. That'd be surprising, because I wasn't expecting that. Dude, if we get Hellblade gameplay today, I'm definitely gonna check that out. So I hope we do, man. I hope we do. And Josh Bullard, you're saying a bit off topic, but the Nuggets are NBA champions. It's been 47 years in the making, and I couldn't be happier. I had no idea, man. Yeah, congratulations to the Nuggets. 47 years, that is a long time, dude. So I'm happy for you, Josh, and I'm happy for all the Nuggets fans out there. I don't pay attention to the NBA, but good for them, man. Good for them. Something else that I know people are going to want to know, did I play the Final Fantasy 16 demo? I did play. I honestly didn't complete it yet. It's actually a little bit longer than I anticipated. But then again, I've been taking my good old time with it. So I think I'm close to finishing it, but I have about an hour and 15 minutes, maybe close to an hour and a half. So I have to be close to finishing it. But yeah, my thoughts on the Final Fantasy 16 demo, dude, it's awesome. Like, it's exactly what I thought it would be. But I have to say, even for me, like, the thing that surprised me the most is the amount of cinematics. And to some people that might sound like a bad thing, but dude, the cinematics are crazy. The scale of what's going on is huge. If I had to use one word to describe Final Fantasy 16 so far, it would simply be epic. And I know that maybe sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not, dude. Like, it is a massive game, a lot going on, like that intro where you're controlling the icon. It was crazy. But I also want to say that the characters are pretty interesting so far. I think that Square has done a great job actually getting me interested in these characters, in this drama, in this kind of, a lot of people are saying it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones. Yeah, it's a lot like that, and it definitely kind of immediately grabs you. There is a lot of dialogue, a lot of exposition, all that, but I think that that's what's making it engaging. And on a gameplay front, so there, generally speaking, it feels awesome. So, like, the actual combat of Final Fantasy 16 feels smooth. A lot of people were going in thinking, oh, this is Devil May Cry Final Fantasy. It's not that. It's definitely not that. However, you can feel the influence of it. Just feels faster. It feels fluid. It feels just more accelerated, I guess, than well, I can't compare it to other Final Fantasy games, but based off of what I heard, it just feels very accelerated. It definitely feels a lot faster to me than even Final Fantasy VII Remake, but it feels really, really good. Obviously, there's a lot of in-depth systems. There's a lot going on there. Final Fantasy 16, you can kind of tell just right off the bat, the presentation is, I mean, they're absolutely nailing the presentation. They're nailing the presentation. The gameplay feels smooth. The gameplay feels fun. It has layers to it that, again, like I haven't really explored it fully. I'm just only an hour and a half in the demo. Um, and yeah, I think Final Fantasy 16 is going to be a massive game this year, dude. And a lot of people are saying it's going to be a game of the year contender. I can see that early on. Like I can see like if they keep this up throughout the entire game, this level of presentation, the scale, the excitement, and the combat just gets better and better and better. And the boss battles, yeah, I could absolutely see that, man. So I'm very impressed. I do want to say it's not perfect though. And the number one thing I know, I've seen a lot of people complaining about the frame rate. It's worth noting I was playing Final Fantasy 16 on the performance mode. So there's a fidelity mode, performance mode, and I've seen a lot of people saying that the performance mode is just horrible, it's broken, whatever. It's not that bad. First of all, like it's not perfect. You can tell, like, yeah, there are times where it's struggling to maintain 60, no doubt about that. But generally speaking, it wasn't as bad as I had expected it to be going into it. However, there is one thing that I am like, Square, please fix this before the final game launches. Um, and that is, you're saying just wait, MBG, you'll see how bad it gets. Guys, I see the same dudes in here. Bro, I know you guys want Final Fantasy to end up being a 30 FPS only game. It's not going to be, man. I'm sorry. It's just not. All right. This isn't Starfield. It's not. It's not Redfall. It's not going to just, you know what I mean? Like, I honestly expected when I was playing this so far, like for it to basically feel like 30 frames. And it doesn't. It doesn't. Does it maintain a stable 60 the entire time? Not at all. No, they definitely need to improve that. And I hope they do. A lot of people are saying it's an older build. I have to hope that that's true and that whatever they're about, the final release is going to be better. But check this out. The one thing about this game that I'm going to have a struggle with adapting to if the developers do not give me the option to turn it off. I saw people in my chat yesterday complaining about the motion blur of in Final Fantasy 16, and I thought like, well, I don't like motion blur either, but why are people complaining so much about it? It's egregious, bro. Like straight up, it's egregious. It's actually some of the worst motion blur I've ever seen. It's like super intense. There has to be a way to turn it off. I looked in the settings. I couldn't find it. Corey Landiga coming in. Corey Landiga getting today's membership train started, gifting a membership. Let's get some W's in the chat for Corey. Corey always showing immense support for the channel here. Thank you so much, Corey. I'll give you that crazy Arnold laugh there. Appreciate the support, dude. You're saying the motion blur is completely off in performance mode? There's no way. There's no possible way. Because I was playing it in the performance mode, and the motion blur is insanely strong. I don't see how that could be possible. Now, don't get me wrong. Is it like make or break? Like, I can't play this game with motion blur on? Absolutely not. I'll get adjusted to it. It's just that out of everything that people are mentioning about the gameplay of Final Fantasy 16, the thing that I am in agreement with is that, yeah, the motion blur is too strong, and I really hope that in the final game there's an option to turn it off. If not, again, not a huge deal, but yeah, that's a problem for me. All right, so there you go. There are my thoughts on the Star Wars Outlaws gameplay demo that we saw yesterday, and my experience so far playing Final Fantasy 16. Obviously, I'm going to go much more in depth with Final Fantasy 16 once the game launches and I get a lot more time with it. But generally speaking, Sony absolutely made a smart move by locking down Final Fantasy 16 as a PS5 exclusive. This game is going to sell a lot of PS5s. This game is probably going to win some awards, if I had to assume. And yeah, this is a heavy hitter, man. So I can, again, the Final Fantasy 16, it just bleeds. It just bleeds like triple anus, right? Has that triple anus to it. And there you go. There you go. Lewis, you're saying you literally just dropped the rock on your own feet, bro? What? Dude, I don't know. Sometimes when I'm like, look, I like check over the chat and like I read the weird, like, what does that even mean? I dropped the rock on my feet. Is this some kind of analogy for like motion blur? AAA gaming? I don't get it, dude. Got that triple anus. All right. So I know a lot of people are here right now. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat. I'm laughing, dude. Oh yeah. Shout out to the soundtrack in Final Fantasy 16 as well. All right. So you guys are probably wondering, what do I mean by my title? Sony is reportedly all in. Xbox just said the opposite. What are you talking about, MBG? Are you going to tell me today again that Xbox sucks and PlayStation's the best? Well, actually, no, that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what we're talking about today. But what we are... So check this out. I said earlier probably before a lot of people were here, this might not seem like the most relevant thing now, but what is one of the biggest headlines that is being discussed right now across the board? One of the biggest headlines is Starfield 30 frames per second. And this has created a massive discourse on the internet about 30 frames per second. You know, there's all different takes. Everybody has their own opinion on it. There are going to be people who tell you this is a joke. This is unacceptable. No one should accept this. We should boycott Starfield and Bethesda and Xbox. There are people on the other side of the spectrum saying this is amazing, actually. I have no problem. If they can give a consistent 30 FPS, I'll be more than happy to enjoy Starfield. And everything will just be great. And then you have a lot of people in the middle where they're like, yeah, it sucks that it's 30. I want it 60, but I'm still excited for the game. You could argue that's the most reasonable take. And actually, I'll read to you what I said on Twitter yesterday, because I kind of put my 2 cents out here. I said, I won't pretend that I haven't enjoyed many games at 30 frames per second. Some of the best gaming experiences I had were at 30 frames per second. However, we have been conditioned to expect 60 frames per second performance mode with these new consoles. And it's understandable that people will be disappointed if that stops. Okay? So there are a couple of things that I'm alluding to here. Number one is that people have come to expect, if you buy a PlayStation 5, if you buy an Xbox Series X, look at the way this generation has went down so far. The generation of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X console has essentially said you can expect a performance mode. And there have been few games that have shipped without 60 FPS performance modes, namely Gotham Knights and A Plague Tale. And both games kind of got tore up for it, although Plague Tale did eventually get a 60 FPS patch. And I think people were a little bit more understanding of that, but Gotham Knights absolutely got wrecked. And even more recently, Redfall, a game that many people were struggling to understand how this game can't hit 60 FPS, Redfall shipped at 30. And they just released an update for Redfall and no 60 FPS. They told people to wait for 60 FPS. It'll come in an update. The first update comes, no 60 FPS. Does anybody care? Probably not, because nobody's playing Redfall. However, this is the truth of the matter. We have been conditioned, if you buy these new consoles, to expect a 60 FPS performance mode. Now, we are seeing that shift. Okay, we are seeing a big game like Starfield. The first, I would say, really big AAA game that is just drawing the line in the sand and saying, yeah, 60 FPS is not happening. We made a choice for whatever reason to stick to 30. And our goal is to make sure we can have a stable 30. And a lot of people are saying that, well, Starfield has to be 30. Look, I have a question. Is anybody here expecting Starfield to run at 30 frames per second on PC? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that a lot of people are going to purposely play Starfield on PC so they can get that 60 FPS. So what narrative is beginning to brew here? What is the narrative? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious. Yes, granted, I understand. I don't want people to misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not saying if you just play the game on PC, it's guaranteed to run at 60. No, you need probably a strong PC. So what is the narrative that's beginning to brew? It's obvious. The narrative is now, these consoles aren't strong enough. These games are getting too big. They're getting too ambitious. The PS5, the Series X, and especially the Series S, they're not going to keep up. So now, what we are beginning to hear is that, well, buckle up, people. 30 FPS is coming back with a vengeance, right? Like, it's coming back in the console space. And even though you've spent practically the past 3 years or close to 3 years expecting performance modes in 60 FPS and you've gotten used to 60 FPS, yeah, that's going away. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen for every game. We know that. We're not being told that going forward, every game's going to be 30 FPS. No, but it will become a trend. Developers will begin to say, we're just going to target 30. So a lot of people talk about Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2. Is Spider-Man 2 going to be 30? We don't have confirmation of that yet. Neutral Zone, you're saying only PlayStation fanboys are talking about the 30 FPS on Starfield. Wrong. Objectively wrong, Neutral Zone. If the only people you're seeing talk about Starfield being 30 FPS are, as you call PlayStation fanboys, then you clearly have a very narrow window into this industry and the people in it. You know, whether that's just fanboys at the bottom. I've seen actual gaming journalists, right, talking about it at length. And one of the things that I forget who said this, but one of the things that I saw somebody say is they were like, people are now beginning to realize that for the past 2.5 years, and you know, again, basically approaching 3 years at this point with these consoles, since they released, people are now beginning to realize that the only reason, seemingly, we were getting 60 FPS so consistently is because we were playing last-gen games. We were playing PS4 and Xbox One games. Now, I don't agree with that entirely, and I think that's I think that's a pretty broad general statement. But it implies that Starfield is basically like the first true next-gen game, and that any game that is even trying to be remotely in Starfield's ballpark is also going to run at 30 frames per second. So the reality is we can't necessarily argue for or against this yet. I see somebody mentioning Ratchet and Clank and Returnal being 60 FPS. That is true, but I'll be honest with you, man. I don't know that we can compare Ratchet and Clank and Returnal to a game like Starfield. I don't know that it makes the most sense to do that. Titus Crow, you're saying I'm talking about that 30 FPS, and I'm no fanboy. Well, there you go. There you go. Stephen Jones, you're saying exactly, MBG. We were told 60 is going to be the new normal, at least give a performance mode. Big Xbox channels are on the 30 FPS wagon now. Well, here's the thing. See, you're probably still asking the question, MBG, what does this have to do with your title? Sony is reportedly all in. Xbox just said the opposite. What are you talking about? Like, are you talking about next-gen games? Like, what's going on? I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. But I'm just trying to make sure that we establish like what came before this moment and where we're likely headed after this moment. That's all I'm trying to do. And yeah, Stephen Jones. Obviously there are PlayStation fanboys. People would say I'm one of them, of course, but obviously there are PlayStation fanboys absolutely tearing up Xbox right now, going off, man, just going ham on Microsoft, on Xbox, on Bethesda, on Starfield, on Xbox fans. But at the same time, you have Xbox fans also taking a defensive position, understandably, because it's like, dude, these are the same guys who ran with the narrative, world's most powerful console. And this is where the rubber really hits the road here. World's most powerful console, even more powerful than the PS5, can't do 60 FPS. I want this to sink in. 2 AAA Xbox Studio games in 2023. Neither of them hit 60 FPS. 2 AAA Xbox Studios games, both locked at 30. All right? But here's the thing. One is justified, one is not. I could sit here and I could tell you for hours, bro, Starfield's a joke, not running at 60. Unacceptable. How are people okay with this? I can't believe it. But this is a scenario where it doesn't matter what I think. Obviously, I have my own thoughts, but it simply doesn't matter what I think because this is the reality. The reality, okay, is that Starfield is going to be 30 on console. That's it. And people are okay with it. You might see some people out there saying otherwise, that they're pissed off about it, that it's unacceptable. But Starfield is a big enough game and there's enough excitement around it. It does not matter. It would be no different than if Spider-Man 2 was announced to be 30 frames per second. If Spider-Man 2 was announced tomorrow to be at 30 frames, you're going to see some people freaking out about it. It's not going to matter. That game's going to sell like hotcakes. It's going to do just fine. We all know that. But what I don't appreciate is that notion right there, is that people, while they are accepting, choose to ignore the fact that we have been conditioned to expect 60 FPS. And that now we just have to deal with the fact that apparently that's not going to happen. And this is where my title comes into play. Sony is reportedly all in. Xbox just said the opposite. This is being super underreported right now. And I've only seen like 1 or 2 outlets talking about it, but it's actually pretty significant if it's true. We have talked at length about multiple reports that not only is Sony doing a PS5 Pro, but they're actually getting ready to ship out PS5 Pro dev kits this month or next month. And these reports are not coming from random people. These reports are not coming from just random insiders. No, the PS5 Pro report specifically is coming from Tom Henderson from Insider Gaming. Tom Henderson has been spot on, 100% accuracy when it comes to PlayStation hardware. And he has fought against people. People have come out and they said, Tom, you're wrong, bro. They're not doing a PS5 Pro. And he says, yes, they are, 100%. Just sit back and watch. And I just think it's humorous that people are willing to go against Tom Henderson when he's never been wrong about leaks regarding PlayStation hardware. Like, I don't know where that comes from, but that's what's being reported. Sony is all in with a mid-gen refresh. And let me ask you, even though the argument has been made over and over and over again that we do not need a mid-gen refresh, we do not need a pro console because we haven't even seen like these developers truly take advantage of the hardware. Okay. True. I'd say that's mostly true. Maybe except for a few exceptions. But now we're reaching that point of the generation where PS4, Xbox One are going bye-bye. Cross-gen is done. Now developers are going to go all in on the hardware. And PlayStation and PlayStation developers are not excluded. We are witnessing everybody come to an agreement. The agreement that everybody's coming to is exactly what I said. Starfield is justifiably 30 frames per second on console. Justifiably. So what now? I've seen people say, well, it doesn't matter, MBG, because Spider-Man 2 and Sony, they're not going that direction. Sony's not going to stop 60 FPS performance modes in their games. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because the second part of my title, I have not answered yet. Xbox just said the opposite. I'll get there. But let's just take this into account before we get there, okay? Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2, I would, if I had to put money on it, it will have a 60 FPS performance mode. And you are going to see people come out, mainly PlayStation fans, and it's understandable because Xbox fans would do the same thing if the roles were reversed. If it's announced that Spider-Man 2 has a 60 FPS performance mode, people are going to fight about it. You're going to see one half say, LOL, look at that. PlayStation's still doing 60 FPS. No problem. Meanwhile, Starfield, pfft. On the other side, people are going to say, what are you, stupid? Look at Starfield. How can you even compare that to Spider-Man? Look at the scale of Starfield and compare that to the scale of Spider-Man. You know, like there's no argument here. It's comparing apples to oranges. And those arguments are going to happen. But there's one key thing here that I want to bring to your attention that indicates this argument might be here to stay. And it might, and I need to emphasize the word might, just remain in Sony's favor. Check this out. So, as I talked about just a moment ago, Sony is reportedly all in with a mid-gen hardware refresh. So, when you hear that, you automatically think, oh, well then obviously Microsoft is as well. If Sony's all in with a PS5 Pro, then clearly Xbox is going to do like a Series X Elite or something. Turns out, no, they're not. I have a report here from Insider Gaming. Phil Spencer doesn't think a new Xbox Series X is needed. A new Xbox Series X console doesn't appear to be in the cards for Microsoft, or a mid-gen refresh, that is. In an interview with Bloomberg after the Xbox Game Showcase, Xbox head Phil Spencer said that the company doesn't think a new Xbox Series X console with upgraded hardware is needed. Quote, that's not the feedback we're getting right now. Right now, we're pretty set on the hardware we have, end quote. The hardware in the Xbox Series family includes the Series X and the Series S. The Series S, however, is getting updated with a new model. Microsoft announced that at the end of their showcase on June 11th, the arrival of the carbon black version of the Series S with a 1 terabyte SSD. Recently, in an interview with Kinda Funny Games, Phil Spencer admitted to Microsoft being third in the console race against Nintendo and Sony. Despite that, however, he said that the goal remains to deliver games that players want to play, whether it be on Xbox consoles, Game Pass, or the cloud. While Xbox might not feel the need for an updated Xbox Series X, the competition seems to feel otherwise. As Insider Gaming has reported in the past, Sony is working on a PlayStation 5 Pro console, and this, my friends, is where the rubber hits the road. Okay? It's easy to jump to the conclusion that, well, there we go. Phil Spencer just said it. Phil Spencer just said they're not doing a mid-gen refresh. And that seems to be what he's saying. However, before people jump to a conclusion, or they assume I'm jumping to a conclusion by saying, well, that might not be true, and maybe you're misunderstanding what he's saying. We need to look at his wording. That's not the feedback we're getting right now. Right now, we're pretty set on the hardware we have. So I want to highlight the word right now. Phil Spencer's not stupid. Phil Spencer's absolutely trained to speak to PR. He's using the word right now. So the scenario that I'm about to set up for you right now could change. And that's the key factor in this conversation. However, it's fascinating to think that this scenario I'm about to set up could possibly be what happens. So before I set up that scenario, let me read these super chats. Have a Supremacy 101 saying FTC to file an injunction to block the ABK deal. Don't get mad, MBG. I know you're tired of talking about this, and digital takeover begins with the new PS5 model. I'm mad, bro. I don't want to hear that shit. Get that out of here. I don't want to hear about the digital takeover and the ABK acquisition. What are you doing, Supremacy? Supremacy's throwing me off. He's throwing me off the rails here. No, of course, man. That injunction, yeah, they're filing that, and we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what I can only go so deep with it. I can only go so deep. Like at this point, we just have to continue to do what we've been doing. We have to sit back and see what is decided with this, man. The digital takeover with the new PS5 model, I hate to say you're right, but goddamn, you're right, man. It's no coincidence. It's no coincidence that we are now seeing AAA video game publishers making the decision that, you know what, we're just going to put our games out digitally. We're not doing a physical model. And then shortly after that, Sony's going to announce a PlayStation 5 model where it has a detachable disc drive. It ships without a disc drive. And if you want the disc drive, you got to buy that separately. Come on, man. We got to support physical gaming. We got to keep physical gaming alive. The Furious, you're saying you fast travel to the planets. You can't fly like in No Man's Sky. Okay, I didn't know that. Maybe I missed that part. It's still pretty cool, though. It's still pretty cool. And New Soul 9, 2 super chats from you. Thank you guys so much for the support. You're saying, MBG, you should take into consideration that Bethesda creation engine is very difficult to develop due to it being old as hell. Like, I'm talking Oblivion era. I agreed they need a new engine. I'm surprised they are still with that old-ass engine for this long. And that's the thing, man, is like, this New Soul 9, this does feed into my conversation about, like, you know, where do we sit with this? Okay, I'm going to ask you guys, and I'll give my take on it before I talk more about this scenario that I'm setting up. Do we look at Starfield and do we think like, yeah, that's a true next gen game, and it's so big and massive. It's like, do we feel like it's understandable that it can't run at 30 frames per second? Do we feel that way? Like, or do we feel that it just feels like it's kind of nonsense? Like, they probably could get a performance mode. It just would require a shit ton of extra work and time that they don't have because they're getting ready to ship this game. Because to me, that is kind of the crazy thing about Starfield is, for as impressive as it does look, it is running on an engine that is like ancient at this point. It's actually insane that they haven't upgraded their engine or like really, you know, gave it a complete overhaul. I'm sure they have their reason for that. It's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably because the game engine overhaul itself would take just as much time as the actual game development, or at least half the time of the game development. And these games are apparently already in development for nearly a decade. So I don't know, man. It's my opinion on the matter. I can kind of see with Starfield, and I can kind of understand where it's like, okay, I get it. Like, you guys are showing enough here, and you're like wowing people enough that you can get away. And that's the thing, man, is Bethesda did it and Xbox did it. Like, they're getting away with it where it's like, it's not 60, it's locked at 30. And then you just hear crickets. Well, maybe not crickets, but it's like, people are like, okay, yeah, all right, yeah, I'll play it. It's like, oh, so you're not mad? You know what I mean? And I've seen people making the argument about, like, again, Redfall, where it's like, well, how come everybody lost their mind about Redfall? Dude, it's obvious. Like, we lost our minds about Redfall because when you look at Redfall, what about that game from top to bottom tells you this isn't capable of running at 60 FPS on the Xbox Series X? Nothing. Nothing about Redfall is impressive. Nothing about Redfall looks impressive in size, scale, or scope. It looks the opposite of impressive. So the bare minimum expectation for a game like Redfall is, yeah, that shit better run at 60 frames per second. At least. But that's not the same expectation for a game like Starfield. Starfield, from a game, like just from a game design perspective, compared to Redfall, apples and oranges. Yes, they're both Bethesda, but they're different games. And I'll be honest, it is completely disingenuous to try to bunch up Starfield and Redfall and say they're the same. They're not. It's no different than the people who are trying to compare Spider-Man to Starfield and say one's better than the other. It's like, what are you talking about? You know? You're saying the Super Chat was wrong. Creation Engine 2 is a new engine. Is that true? I mean, I imagine that some upgrades have happened. They've had to happen, right? With the Creation Engine. But I think mainly what people are talking about is just a complete, like, I'm talking like from the ground up, like this is a brand new engine. You know, I don't know. So let me get back to the scenario. So, all right, MBG, Sony's reportedly all in. Xbox just said the opposite. Yes. Notice how I said in my title, Sony says they're all in. We don't know that, but we're pretty sure. Sony hasn't talked about a PS5 Pro. They're not going to talk about a PS5 Pro until they announce a PS5 Pro. But all the reports are claiming that Sony is doing a PS5 Pro, so much so that dev kits are about to go out. Meanwhile, Phil Spencer says, yeah, we don't have any plans for that right now. Right now, that's not the feedback we're getting. Now, he's not wrong. I want to make that clear. Normally, you know, I don't agree with Phil Spencer, but he's not wrong. Not many people have been asking for a mid-gen refresh for either the Xbox or the PlayStation. However, it seems that we could be at an inflection point where if it is true that the only reason we've been getting 60 FPS performance modes so consistently with all of these games is because they're cross-gen games. Like, these are games that were originally built on the PS4 and the Xbox One. And it's really easy to give them 60 FPS performance modes, you know? And once development has fully shifted to current gen only, PS5 and Xbox Series X, it turns out, we're going to have to actually make way more compromises than we would like to for our next gen game to get this to run at 60. We're going to find out. But again, I want to make it known. We are finding out. We are beginning to find out right now with Starfield. Again, everybody is saying that Starfield is justifiably 30 frames per second. If that's true, then that means going forward, we are going to see more games ship at 30 frames per second locked. Justifiably, because they're next-gen games, right? A scenario we could end up seeing unfolding. And picture this. This would be wild. This would be insane. And it would be probably a console fanboy's, you know, like, hell yeah, dude. If you're a PlayStation fan. If you're an Xbox fan, this would be the worst case scenario for the Xbox console. Imagine a scenario where it's June 2024. Sony holds a showcase, and in that showcase, they announce a PS5 Pro. And the PS5 Pro is significantly more powerful than both the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. I mean, that would be the point of a Pro. It has to be more powerful, right? The Xbox Series X is no longer the world's most powerful console. Instead, the PS5 Pro is. Sony announces that the PS5 Pro is launching November 2024. Meanwhile, Xbox hasn't announced anything. Maybe Xbox announces their like streaming box or something. I think that I could see that being a hardware announcement. But no mid-gen refresh for the Xbox. Nothing. Well, At that point, what the PS5 Pro could end up becoming if Microsoft truly does decide. And again, I don't know that I fully believe it. I'll be honest, I have a difficult time believing Microsoft won't do a mid-gen refresh. That to me sounds difficult to believe. But what could happen if Microsoft truly decides we're not doing that? We're fine with the X. Sony's PS5 Pro could facilitate it could allow the 60 FPS performance mode to be maintained in these bigger games. And if that ends up happening with these bigger, more next-gen games, holy shit, that's going to be bad for Microsoft. And Phil Spencer is going to learn real quick, at least from the Xbox owner side of things, that the feedback is you need to make a next-gen refresh now. This is why it's so interesting to me to be getting such conflicting reports, because Tom Henderson has been asked multiple times before, is Xbox doing a mid-gen refresh? And he's heard nothing about it. This leads me to believe that I think Phil might not be lying here, guys. Like, he might be saying, yeah, we're not investing in that. That's going to be one of the craziest scenarios that I think we ever see. You're saying doubt MBG. Do you know how APUs work? Well, okay. So on a more technical level, it's impossible for me to talk about the technical side of a PS5 Pro because we don't know what a PS5 Pro would entail. However, am I crazy to think that if I'm trying to just give an example here. Let's just say Sony Santa Monica. Sony Santa Monica, they have a new IP they're working on. It's a big sci-fi game. Okay? Let's just say that this big sci-fi game, it turns out there can be no 60 FPS mode. It can't run at 60 FPS on the PS5 because it's just too big. It's too detailed, whatever. But then Sony's like, but don't worry, we have you covered. With the PS5 Pro, there will be a 60 FPS performance mode. To me, that you know what that reminds me of? Honestly, right now, that reminds me of the exact scenario we see with the Xbox Series X and the S, where the X always gets the 60 FPS, the S not so much. Ray Hugh, thank you so much, man. We got Ray Hugh coming out here, gifting a membership, keeping that membership train going. Really appreciate that, dude. Love to see it, man. Thank you for your support, Ray. Let's get some W's in the chat for Ray Hugh coming out here. You're saying your shelves won't be big enough for a PS5 Pro? Yeah, maybe not. So, yeah, I did see somebody saying Red Gaming Tech, apparently his sources have confirmed to him that Microsoft is working on a mid-gen console refresh. Now, I want to say this as well. And Jake Campbell, sorry, man, hold on. New Soul 9, you're saying Creation Engine 2 is more of an update, not a massive upgrade to the original one. I can see Bethesda doesn't want to put the time to learn a new engine. That's what I'm thinking too. Creation, because I've heard people talk about this. The upgrade to the Creation engine just seems more like a incremental thing and not necessarily like a next gen like overhaul for their engine that a lot of people are saying is needed. MBG, do you think PlayStation hasn't shown games because of a PS5 Pro? That's it. That's an interesting theory. That's actually an interesting. I actually haven't considered that. Jake Campbell, you're saying Starfield is the first true next gen game. I don't know, man. I guess maybe you're right. Some of the things that Starfield is doing do look impressive, but I don't know, man. I'm not seeing like, I think that some of the things they're doing are like, wow, yeah, that's pretty good, man. Like, that looks cool. But I didn't see anything about Starfield that makes me go like, what the fuck? That's just me. You know, that's just me. But saying Ratchet and Clank was the first true next gen game, I will say when Ratchet and Clank dropped, it sure did feel like it because of what they did with the portal teleportation. But I'll be honest, looking back on it, I don't even know that I would call Ratchet a true next gen game, only because it's like, to me, it seems more like the first game to try to actually do something that looks next gen. That's like, check this out. You know what I mean? But it wasn't like the type of game that I think we're all trying to describe, like a true next gen game. The reason why I think this may be like a unicorn type situation is because I don't know that that's going to happen, at least anytime soon. Because think about it, man. Like, a true next gen, like a game that's so next gen at this point would have to do something just mind bending. Like, I've never, ever even imagined something like this. And look at that. I feel like the more likely thing we're going to see from both Sony and Microsoft and other game developers when it comes to next gen is we're going to see layers. That's what I think, like, to me, the thing that makes Starfield so impressive to most people is it's layered to the nth degree. It's like, look at all these systems that you've seen in all these different games. And it's like this giant sandwich, man. Just this giant layered sandwich. That's like, have you ever seen a sandwich like this? It's like, no, I guess not. But it's still a sandwich. You know what I mean? It's like, but I've seen many sandwiches. I feel like that's just the nature of, like, what it, like, we talked about VR and how you see what Apple's now doing with their headset. It's like the next mind-bending thing that will probably happen is not going to be in the console space. Truthfully. I don't think that's going to happen in the traditional gaming, like, PC console space. I think it's going to happen in just a completely different area in gaming that it's like, holy shit, like, that is truly the next evolution of interaction with video games. But getting back to the conversation here, do we really believe that Microsoft is not going to do a mid-gen refresh console? Well, I will tell you this. It really comes down to how much Microsoft cares about the power narrative and how much they really do care about the console. Because everything that Microsoft has been doing and saying thus far leads me to believe that they might be totally fine without doing a mid-gen refresh. I could be wrong about that, and I wouldn't be shocked if I was wrong, but when I think about the fact that Phil Spencer has totally downplayed the console market, Xbox came out punching hard, man, with the power narrative, and they just dropped it. They dropped that shit like a bag of hammers. They don't talk about power anymore. They've completely shifted their narrative, and they still have the most powerful console, on paper, technically speaking, but they've dropped it. And we know that Mark Cerny is going to be the one responsible for the Pro. Here's a likely scenario that I could see playing out. I could see a scenario playing out where the PS5 Pro is announced June of next year, and then it releases at the end of 2024. And for the next year and a half, the PS5 Pro is the most powerful console. And that's, people are going crazy because they're like, what, Microsoft can't compete now with the Pro, right? Like, and then Xbox comes out. And like, actually, we did decide to do a mid-gen refresh. And because we took kind of like exactly what we saw with the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X, if you remember that. The PS4 Pro came out earlier. People were super impressed by it. Sony had the most powerful console. PlayStation fans had the bragging rights in that area for about a year, and then Xbox was like, "Yeah, actually, we're going to take that back now with the Xbox One X." Um, but I think what makes it very interesting this time around is if you think about the battle between the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X last gen, that battle was mainly focused on resolution. Does it hit native 4K or can it not do native 4K? Right? This time around, I think it's going to be the opposite. I think it's going to be with the PS5 Pro a scenario where it's like, let's just, somebody asked me like, oh, do you think they're not revealing some of their games because they're waiting for the Pro? Well, I have no doubt that Sony's not stupid. They know that if they really want to get a lot of buzz around their games in terms of visuals and how impressive they look and how impressive they run, being able to do that with a Pro model of the PS5 would probably go a long way for them, especially if their competition doesn't currently have or is not planning to release a mid-gen refresh console. Like I think about Wolverine, right? Wolverine is a game we're going to see next year. And I am telling you, we're likely going to see our first glimpse of Wolverine running on a PS5 Pro. And I could see, I don't know, I could see a scenario where maybe they're like, we went all in with the development of Wolverine. This is a game that has been built from the ground up on the PS5, and we're pushing the limit. It's going to be locked at 30 FPS on the base model PS5, but if you buy a Pro, you'll get it you could get that 60 FPS performance mode. Or if you still want to play it at 30 FPS on the Pro, you can get like native 4K with even greater ray tracing. I could see that, man. I could absolutely see that. Now imagine if Sony does that. You're saying not a chance that happens. Why do you think? I'm curious. Why do you think that wouldn't be possible? You're saying what the F has this narrative come from? It comes from the fact that Phil Spencer is saying that apparently they're not doing a mid-gen refresh for the Xbox. But Sony is. Sony is doing a Pro. You're saying these consoles are not possible to do 60 frames on games pushing the limit. They aren't powerful enough. But that's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying, though, like if they have a Pro model, you know what I mean? I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be possible. I guess it comes down to what we would expect a PS5 Pro to be. You're saying Sony is not going to do that? You're right. So here's the thing. Here's the big assumption that I'm making. I mean, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but the biggest assumption here is not the Pro. It's not about these mid-gen refreshes. That's not the biggest assumption I'm making. The biggest assumption I'm making right now is that Sony's going to stop having 60 FPS in their games like Microsoft. Let me ask you this. Here's a great question. I think this is a really good question. We've seen Sony's games, right? We see a game like Spider-Man 2, and again, a game like Spider-Man 2 is very likely going to have a 60 FPS performance mode. My question is, if we had to choose between one or the other from Sony, and I'd be really curious to see what most of the PlayStation fan base would say here. If the choice is Sony Studios are now going to increase the scope and the scale of their games, but in doing so, they have no choice but to sacrifice a 60 FPS performance mode, similar to Starfield, and let's just say Ghost of Tsushima 2. Let's say Sucker Punch just does some crazy shit with Ghost of Tsushima 2, and they're like, yeah, that it's going to be at 30. Would we be okay? Like, would we prefer that? Or would we prefer that Sony waits to do that type of stuff until the PS6, so we can maintain, you know, having that 60 FPS. It's interesting to think that this might be what it ultimately comes down to. You say you'd rather them shorten the game and make it 60? I don't think the length of the game has to do with it. You know what I want to see? There have been people coming out saying that, dude, a game like Starfield it's possible to do 60 FPS on the Series X and even a console like the PS5. Like, it is doable. I've seen people say that. Obviously, I don't think there's any way we can prove it. But there are people coming out and saying that the reason why Starfield is struggling so much is because, the engine is not great. And, the amount of heavy lifting and development time that it would take to even possibly do 60 FPS, it's just not worth it. Too many things could possibly break. You're saying, are devs saying that? Well, they're never going to say that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. If devs have been talking about Starfield, the only devs I've been hearing talk about Starfield are Bethesda devs, pretty much saying like, it's a creative decision. We decided to go with 30 FPS. Now, again, I'm not saying I believe people who are saying. Just to be clear, I'm not saying Starfield can do 60 FPS. I am not a developer. I don't know. Here's what I am saying, though. What I would love to see is Sony at some point in time put out a game that looks similar in scale, scope, and size, and to see if the same thing would happen. Like would so if this was a, and I'm just curious, like I'm just wondering, because again, like the implication right now is that games that look ambitious will not run at 60. And I feel weird. Like I guess I have a difficult time believing that if Sony is planning to make their games bigger and more ambitious, I think naturally that's what people are expecting. Like Naughty Dog's next game and, again, Sucker Punch next game. I think people are expecting like they're going to be even bigger and more ambitious than they were previously. I'm just having a difficult time imagining Sony coming out and being like, and the game's going to run at 60. You're saying Sony can never make a game like Starfield? I wouldn't say never. I will say, though, I don't know that I ever imagined Sony making a game like Starfield. Sony just doesn't make games like that. Like, Sony isn't Bethesda, Microsoft doesn't make games like that. Bethesda is, I will say, that's the thing about Bethesda is they kind of have their own unique, and I think maybe that is why Bethesda is getting a pass here. More than anything, I think it's because it's just Bethesda is making a game that, most other people are not making, and it is kind of unique in the sense that there's not really anything around it. Nobody's really making anything like that. So I do think that you're saying, and then people are talking about the Star Wars game. We'll see about that. I know people, we're going to find out. Like, this is one of the reasons why I'm very interested to see how Starfield is talked about after it's released, because the expectation right now for Starfield, and I think it's a fair expectation based off of what we've seen, is people are talking about it like this is going to be like a once in a generation game. And that reminds me of like Rockstar and stuff like that, right? Where it's like, you pretty much get one, maybe two games from them if you're lucky per generation. And we'll see, man. I mean, that you can't deny that is ambitious. Let me see. You're saying MBG, a dev from Santa Monica, has come out and defended 30 FPS on Starfield and vouched for it. Interesting. Probably because he's like, oh God, we need to get people prepared because they're not going to like the fact that our next game is going to be 30 FPS. I bet you that's what it is, man. The devs know. The devs are like, oh shit. Zedhead90, you're saying, I look at Starfield's innovation and I see an endless procedurally generated universe spanning resource grind. No effing thanks. Give me my 60 FPS. Well, I mean, hey man, I will say that like that is kind of why. See, to me that's the charm and the allure of a Bethesda open world RPG, and I realize that. I realize that's not what I'm looking for in a video game. I talk about how I tried to play the Elder Scrolls, and the only thing I thought to myself about the Elder Scrolls is, why does this combat absolutely suck? Like, that's all I felt. And everybody's like, looking at me like, dude, everybody who likes the game, they're like, have you not noticed everything else about this game? And I'm like, yeah, I know I can go anywhere and do anything, but what I'm trying to say is I realize that for me, games where exploration is at the core, like this game is about exploration and exploring. I don't like those games. They actually, I'm just not that type person. I'm not into those types of games. I'm just like, I like open worlds and I like a little bit of freedom, but I realize that the type of RPGs that Bethesda makes are just simply they're just too vast for me, man, where it's like, I'm not trying to explore 1,000 planets. You know what I mean? That's just me. That's just me. I understand why in video games that's like, wow, that sounds crazy and mind blowing to me. But for me, it's just like I'm just not sold. Like, to me, that's a weird selling point. That's all. You can explore thousands of planets. Like, bro, I'm already having trouble keeping up with the amount of games that are coming out. Just playing even short games. Like, how am I going to explore thousands of planets? You know. But I get it. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You're saying you don't have to explore all of them. Yeah, knowing me though, see, dude, the reason why I think I could never truly get deep into a Bethesda RPG is probably because I would like, I think people when they play Starfield, they're going to be playing that game for like 2 years straight, dude. Like 2 years, like they're going to have the biggest backlog because they're like, shit, man. Saying Corey Barlog is about to show Todd Howard how it's done. I don't know, man. I don't think Santa Monica Studio, apparently they are making a sci-fi game. I don't think it's going to be like anything like a Starfield or anything like that. It could. I don't know. That'd be quite shocking. But to me, this is why I think the title of this stream is, this is what I thought in my head is, it's like Sony is reportedly all in with doing a mid-gen refresh. And Microsoft is apparently, based off of Phil Spencer's comments, they're not planning on doing one. And I'm just kind of curious to see when we go, as we go deeper into the generation, going into 2024, we see more and more like true next gen games revealed, both third party and first party. I'm really interested to see, like, is this how it's going to play out? Are we going to see a scenario where Sony comes out, they roll out a PS5 Pro, people are like, God damn, games look incredible on that, and Sony's like flexing and being like, yep, now we're the world's most powerful console, and Microsoft is just like, okay, like, console's not our main focus, man. That's why I'm saying I do kind of believe Phil when he says, but then again, it's tough because I do want to highlight once again, he says right now. That's key, man. That is the key terminology. That, let me ask you this. Let me just look at the other side. So Sony's reportedly all in with a mid-gen refresh with the PS5 Pro. Xbox apparently just said, no, we're not doing that. We don't have any plans right now. Do we see a scenario where this actually backfires on Sony? Do you guys think that's possible? Where people are actually mad at Sony for doing a PS5 Pro and they start to praise Microsoft for not doing a mid-gen refresh? Saying, why is your title so clickbaity? It's not. Listen, man, if you view at putting a question in my title as clickbaity, then I don't know what to tell you, man. Like, you know, I'm just trying to keep it interesting. If I literally said in my title, Phil Spencer said they're not doing a mid-gen refresh, first off, the first question people are going to ask themselves is, what does this have to do with PlayStation, even though it has a lot to do with PlayStation because of the PS5 Pro. And then, a lot of people are just going to think like, whatever. It doesn't keep things as interesting. So if it's clickbait, it's clickbait, man. You're saying it depends on what they do to the Pro. MBG, a PS5 Pro would not have an upgraded CPU just like the PS4 Pro didn't, so games would not go from 30 to 60 FPS. Well, so here's the thing. Because I think you're right about that. So essentially, the GPU would be upgraded. If Sony goes that route, doesn't that ultimately mean, though, that if a game is built with 60 FPS in mind, it will allow for a higher resolution? See, I think this ultimately comes down to game engines. Because that's the thing, like, it seems to me that the creation engine is not an engine designed to do 60 FPS on a console, and it never was. That's like kind of what I'm getting from this. You're saying wrong, the CPU in the Pro and the X had a huge increase in the CPU frequency. MBG depends if the game is CPU limited or GPU limited. Yeah, I mean, it's complex because it is different for each studio and each game and each engine. So I don't know. I guess it comes down to Mark Cerny, man. Right? Mark Cerny's smart. Mark Cerny that's why I put him in the thumbnail. Mark Cerny's gonna have a pretty good idea of. You have to imagine that as Mark Cerny was developing the PS5 Pro, he was thinking about like what is it that people are gonna expect from it. What is it that because you might be right. You might be right in that, dude, a PS5 Pro isn't going to make a 30 FPS game go to 60. That's the PlayStation 6. That makes sense to me. Saying MBG is too hung up on a Pro, man. It's mainly, look, I'm happy with the PS5. I am. But it is interesting to me that even right now, people are beginning to question. They're beginning to question and they're like, dude, how come it seems like Final Fantasy 16 is struggling at 60? There are people coming out and they're saying Final Fantasy 16 is struggling at 60 right now because it's it just is. The PS5 is not powerful enough. It's got too much going on. And then there are people saying, no, man, it's because it's an older build of the game. I don't know. But I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't be like totally shocked if when the full game of Final Fantasy 16 is out, Digital Foundry comes out and they're like, it's not a stable 60. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be shocked. Like, and that's where it's like, if it was on a PS5 Pro, would it be a stable 60? At an even higher resolution? Saying isn't Final Fantasy 16 built for the PS5? Well, yeah, but I mean, dude, just because games are purpose built doesn't look. The truth is, I would be quite surprised if they didn't have a smooth 60 because at launch, because that's like, dude, you guys talked about how you just spent the last year polishing this game. You're so confident in how finished this game is, you don't even have a day one patch. So that would essentially mean that they knew this whole time, like, this game ain't going to run at a full 60. But then again, maybe they mentioned that in an interview. Maybe I would have to look into it, but they've been pretty honest with their game, man. They've been pretty candid, and I wouldn't be surprised if in an interview they're like, yeah, we have a 60 FPS performance mode and it targets 60 as often as it can, or something like that. But you know what's crazy to me is that, like, dude, there are people focused on the fact that Final Fantasy 16 isn't running at a smooth 60 FPS on the PS5 with the demo, but they're out here basically. You see how I'm saying, like, people want to have their cake and eat it too? It's bullshit. It's just fucking bullshit, man. Where it's like, it's okay for Microsoft's new game to run at 30, but if Sony's new game can't maintain a smooth 60, well, that's a fucking problem. It's like, what? And this is what I mean. This is why I'm here to tell people that Starfield is not the be all end all. You know? Like, just be like, you could say, well, like, Final Fantasy 16 isn't doing look, Starfield is doing many different things that Final Fantasy 16 isn't. It's like, yeah. Hence why there's no 60 FPS mode. Hence why there's a 60 FPS performance mode for Final Fantasy. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird, man. I don't know. People are getting weird out here. I'm getting weird out here apparently with some of these arguments. Christopher Heard, you're saying, yeah, man. It will be the case. It'll be a case by case for engines. If that's true, then it seems to me that the majority of Sony studios, it really seems like they did prioritize being able to ensure that their games can hit 60 FPS. That's exactly why I'm looking at Spider-Man 2 and I'm like, this game's gonna have to be at 60 FPS. Like, it has to, because it's the same engine. You know what I mean? It's the same engine as the last two Spider-Man games, and they absolutely killed it with their performance on and not Insomniac and Ratchet and Clank. So here's another one I have for you guys. I have an article here. Xbox Game Studios boss explains lack of first-party releases. Matt Booty, the chief of Xbox Game Studios, has explained why the company doesn't have as many first-party releases as people would like. Much of this has to do with development time, according to the businessman. Why are there so few Xbox first-party games? According to a report from Axios, Matt Booty explains that big budget titles take longer to develop, especially for Xbox. I don't know why it's especially for Xbox. There was a time when studios were able to put out a few games a decade. However, it's likely that many will be lucky to be able to push out more than one release during this time period going forward. Booty goes on to say that this caught many people in the industry by surprise. He adds that teams working on big budget titles for Xbox can easily take up to 6 years to develop a product. This could explain why the Microsoft console appears to lack first-party games. The days of being able to create something 2 or 3 years are over, Matt Booty says. This all falls in line with how advanced gaming has become over the years. With much bigger budgets, 4K, and other technology to consider, it means that studios are having to take longer to get something out the door, not to mention the higher expectations, the Axios report goes on to say. Conversely, Matt Booty does believe that smaller, more independent studios can get games out quicker, maybe in under a year, but for AAA releases, especially for ones on Xbox, developers are spending a lot longer on a single title. This is kind of, I just think it's kind of humorous, I'll be honest with you, because it's like, dude, that's fucking bullshit. That's just nonsense, man. He's not wrong. Matt Booty is correct in that games now take longer than ever to make, especially big AAA ones. But I just think it's insane that his answer, when he was asked, like, so how come Xbox didn't really have much first party, for like a while? Yeah, games just take long to develop. Like, well, how come your competition has been able to just bang, 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 putting out AAA releases? Just saying, like, I get it. yeah, games take a long time. It's almost like he's saying, we here at Microsoft don't quite know how to properly manage AAA game development. We don't get it, or it took us up until this point to realize it takes. I just thought it was interesting, man, because this is something we've been talking about for a while with PlayStation. Hold on, check this out. What? No way. This can't be real. Hold on, I just came across this. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora free DLC announced for PS5, paid on Xbox. What? Hold on. This is coming from purexbox.com. One of the big reveals from yesterday's Ubisoft Forward event was a huge gameplay blowout for the upcoming Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which now has a release date attached. However, we've been stung a little bit here with some DLC content that's free on PlayStation 5 and paid on other platforms. Yep, Ubisoft has detailed the Arana Warrior Pack containing a character cosmetic set and a weapon cosmetic set based on the traditional gear. The pack will be free to all PS5 players, but a premium add-on for the Xbox Series X and S and PC. For now, Ubisoft has revealed a price tag, but they haven't revealed a price tag, but we expect it to cost anywhere between $5 and $10. What? Dude, that just feels like at this point Sony is straight up trolling Xbox fans, man. Holy shit, that's crazy. Craig, you're saying Fable dislikes is insane. Stuff like that I think is kind of silly, you know? Is that going to be on Game Pass? No, I don't think so. You're saying Sony is petty? They are. Dude, can you blame them though? Like this is where normally I would say, like, damn, Sony, that is petty. But Sony is watching their rival trying to straight up eat publishers. Fuck it, you know? It's anything goes now. Go ahead, Sony. Get all your little DLCs. Shit makes it's stupid, man, but it's funny, I think. Because like something like that would never make if I were on Xbox, I'd be like, who cares? You know what I mean? Like truthfully, if I was on Xbox, I'd be like, damn, Sony, that's pretty whack. But you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Is that actually going to make somebody decide to not buy the game on the console of their choice? You're saying they're not taking it away from Xbox players. They're just paying for it up front for their PS players. That's a great point. That you're right. You're actually right about that. That is a great point. Sony is paying. Basically, Sony's covering the cost for their players. Nobody will look at it that way, though. You know that? No one will look at it that way. Everybody will just say, damn. See, everybody shits on Jim Ryan. Jim ain't too bad. Sony's doing stuff for the consumer, for their player base. There you go. Get some free DLC for your little Avatar game. It's so funny to me that it's an Avatar game, though, you know? Like, it's just so random. New Soul 9, you're saying MBG because Sony had a foundation. When you have a foundation for game development, it takes less time. That's completely different from starting from scratch. Well, there's no doubt about that. I mean, look, man, I know I'm busting Matt Booty's balls. God, that is a weird way to say that, but I know I'm busting their chops right now. You know, basically being like, oh yeah, of course, game development takes long. How come your competition? You're right though. I don't expect Matt Booty to come out and say, I don't expect Matt Booty to come out and simply say like, hey, it's because we didn't we had trouble managing our studios. We couldn't quite figure it out. Of course he's not going to say that. Why? You know, it doesn't make any sense. But you know, this is just where it's obvious. We've been talking about this for a long time that like Sony really has done a great job like you said, establishing a foundation. And that's like, to me, that's where the real competition has to come from with Microsoft. And that is why you could argue that when we talk about Xbox's show, like, why was it so good? You could argue that for the first time, like, Xbox seemingly has a solid foundation of studios and a pipeline and consistent content output that seems like it's going to be pretty good. I saw somebody mention that the like to dislike ratio is really bad for Fable. Can somebody tell me what that is? Because I don't have the add on to look. I don't care enough. But that to me is surprising. I thought everybody was excited about Fable. KC, you're saying it's designed to make people who have both choose the PlayStation version. True. That's a good point, KC. It's an effective strategy if you think about it. Because you're right. If somebody does have both, and basically Sony's like, but on ours, you get some free DLC, it's like, oh, okay. There you go. The decision just became that much easier. You're saying old Fable fans are mad about the age of heroes being over. MBG, did you discuss the FTC injunction against the ABK merger? I did a little bit, yeah. A little bit earlier. Dude, you know what I saw on Twitter people talking about when it comes to Fable? And I'm not, dude, look, I'm telling you right now, I'm not diving into this conversation because, people get kind of crazy over it. But dude, I saw a lot of people pretty annoyed that the main protagonist, who's a female in Fable, is like, people are like, dude, this chick is hideous. Like straight up ugly. And I'm just like, well, no comment. Like, I think look, man, I'm not playing. I'll put this out. I'm not playing my games to look at hot, attractive men or women. That is not at all like why I'm playing games. I think, like, I'll be honest, if that's your takeaway from the Fable reveal, like, I don't know, man. It's you know what it is? It's because people are basically saying it's like it becomes like a political thing, right? The reason why I think people are saying that is because the idea is the developers purposely made this female protagonist ugly and unattractive. And that's like a feminist thing. And I'm like, well, it seems a bit extreme to me, Like, I looked at the character and I'm like, all right. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not like she's some kind of supermodel, I'm putting it as nicely as I can here. But at the same time, it's like, it looks kind of, realistic to me, where it's like, yeah, there are a lot of people that probably kind of look like that, and it's like, you could just say, like, sometimes it's kind of like an average person. Like, all right, let me put it to you this way. If I was walking on the street and I saw if I saw a woman walk by that had the face of Fable's protagonist, I wouldn't think to myself, fuck, whoa, Jesus, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really not that. Like, I would just think that's just a person. It's just a person. You know what I mean? And that's why I find it strange that people are so, like, fixated where it's like, she's fucking ugly. Like, okay. You know what I mean? I don't get it, man. Jim Ryan has a nice face. Oh my God. You're saying stop the cap, MBG. No, dude, I'm not. Look, man, I'm really not. I really don't think I'm being out of pocket right now. Like, don't get me wrong. If somebody said, like, yo, the main protagonist of this game is not the most attractive looking person I've ever seen, I'd be like, okay, yeah, well, sure. Why not? But I don't know, man. I just think, what I think is funny, though, is like, people were saying, just like, dude, have you not seen some of the games we're getting? Like, dude, take a look at Mortal Kombat. Take a look at, like, these fighting games and shit. It's like, they're like going the opposite direction, where it's like everybody is fucking beautiful, ripped, chiseled, you know, just like over the top. Saying you're walking on eggshells, MBG. I don't think so, dude. Like, to me, look, people with stuff like this, they get extreme about it. It's like anything else. It's like, you either think she's ugly or you don't, and that determines which side you're on. It's like, or hear me out. We could just say that's the protagonist of a video game. That's the way they look. You know, maybe focus on what the game is supposed to be about. You know what I mean? It's just weird to me. It's just bizarre. Do you find Abby hot? I mean, not in particular. No, she like. I'm indifferent to it. Like, you know, first off, I'm a married man. Second off, that's not why I'm. You know, like, I just think that's crazy. Like, I just have a difficult time imagining going into The Last of Us Part 2 and being like, so how hot are they? That's going to determine my enjoyment of this game. It's like, bro, like, do you know what game you're playing right now? You know what would be funny as hell, though? If, like, because think about this, because it goes the other way, too. It goes the other way, too. Like, imagine if you played The Last of Us Part 2 and Abby was, like, you know, because she's like, pretty muscular. But imagine that, like, they like, dolled her up. Like, she had all this makeup on, and she, like, wore a dress or something. Like, that would be, I would argue that would be actually terrifying. Like, that would be weird and out of, like, that would be so out of place, you know? I think it would actually convey that this character might be insane. Because you're in a post-apocalyptic world, you know? Like, why are you worried about your makeup? But that's how people act, man. You know what? It also reminds me of Horizon Forbidden West. I remember when everybody was like, why does Aloy look ugly? Why does Aloy have peach fuzz on her face? It's like, dude, you serious right now? And I remember people were like clowning on those people, being like, bro, you need to go out and talk to women and just like talk to people. Like, you need to go see real people. Okay. Just like, yeah, dude. For real. Let me see. We got Josh. You were saying some fanboy tomfoolery yesterday. You forgot everyone also said that Xbox had an amazing show when they closed with Redfall. Fast forward 2 years, and what do they have to show for it? I'm all for giving due praise, and Xbox deserves it for the show, but that doesn't equal Xbox is all of a sudden doing amazing. Showcases are the commercial. These games need to come out and be good/great. You're absolutely, Josh. You're. Let's get look. You are 100% correct. You just hit the nail on the head. 100%. There's not a single thing you said that's wrong. And anybody who disagrees is in denial. They're in denial because all you're saying is everybody said Xbox's 2021 showcase was great, and that was the same showcase where they closed with Redfall. And we saw how Redfall turned out. And you're just pointing out that there's showing and then there's telling. And if you get excited for the showing, just be prepared that the telling part might be a little bit different. And you're simply just pointing out that they completed the first phase, which is they successfully showed. Now they have to tell successfully. They talk the talk, now they have to walk the walk. And you're 100% correct. Like, the credit, in my opinion, does not go to Xbox until they do it. And that's seemingly they're going to. Like, I think the assumption is, well, at the very least, Starfield and Forza this year are going to do it, you know? So I feel confident in saying that, but it is true, man. Like, we do have to see them actually deliver these games. We have to see how they're going to play, if they're actually going to be polished and finished and as good as people are hoping they will be. Microsoft now has to do what Sony has been doing. That's where Microsoft is. And I think that this is why it has been frustrating. It has been kind of frustrating because a lot of people are beginning to talk as if Sony hasn't been doing this, and they have been. And I think just what's made it so easy is, like I said, man, Sony kind of dropped the ball recently. They dropped the ball recently, and it's understandable that people are going to kind of walk away from that and be like, well, all right, I guess, Sony they fell off, right? Saying Destin tweeted that 60 FPS is a buzzword. No way. Nah. Why would he tweet that? I don't believe that. Like, come on. A buzzword? 60 FPS is a buzzword? He really did? No way. Come on. That's so dumb. I don't get that. I feel like what he means, what he should have said is 60 FPS should be a buzzword to him, because it's like, that's not. 60 FPS isn't a buzzword. It's literally a huge factor in like how you're going to experience a game. Saying ray tracing is a buzzword, that I agree with a lot more. Because like ray tracing, ray tracing to me is something that can enhance your experience visually, but you very likely won't notice if it's gone. You know what I mean? Or at least it'll have very, very minimal impact. If you play a game, especially a fast-paced game, at 60 FPS, and then you just rip that away, you will notice that, and it will have a tangible, practical impact on your gameplay experience, at least until you readjust to 30 frames. So I do not think 60 FPS is a buzzword. T-flops is a buzzword. Yeah, I agree with. T-flops is a buzzword, and that's been proven. It's
dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of performance.
So you're absolutely right, Josh. Jay Pierce, you're saying MBG, what I don't understand is how people talk crap about the Zelda game, and it's one of the biggest games ever and runs at 30 FPS on an 8-year-old system. Well, it's the nature of the industry and expectation, dude. All right. People argue all the time that certain gaming companies get passes when they shouldn't. And I'm not here to say who should get a pass and who shouldn't, but I think to me what it boils down to is it's a matter of earned respect. I know that sounds strange because people are like going to automatically say that's not true. But really, I implore you to think about this for a moment. When Nintendo comes out with his Switch console, right? And they say, this is our console. It is unique. It is not just a home console. It is not just a portable console. It is both. People are wowed by that. They say, wow, that is different and innovative and unexpected. And then the bad news comes out. And the bad news is it's also pretty underwhelming power-wise. It's not a powerful console. So that was the cost. The cost of innovation was, in this case, power. And, it's going to have limited power and capability. I think at the end of the day, people are willing to respect something if it makes sense, if it's done right and it makes sense, where, you know what? It may not be a powerful console and it may not do the things that other consoles can do for games. But you have this inherent respect that it's different when it didn't need to be different. But it is, and it works. So that respect, I think, also carries over to other things. When you think about why are people so loyal to Nintendo's games? How does a game like, Tears of the Kingdom sell the way it does and just destroy everything, even though it is running at 30 frames and it just, it looks last gen and beyond last gen in some cases? It's respect, man. It's respect for the fact that, wow, you guys are consistent with your games, and your games are always doing something interesting and in some cases innovative, something fun, something unique. And that respect also blends with enjoyment. And those two things mix together, man, and it creates loyalty. It creates loyalty, and that's what it comes down to. Um, and that's why I think like a game like Tears of the Kingdom can come out looking less than ideal, running less than ideal, but playing great because it's a fun video game, and people ultimately they they can look past that stuff, man. Like they can look past the fact that, yeah, this game runs at 30 and it can be kind of choppy at times. That suddenly T-flops mean nothing. Suddenly ray tracing means nothing. Suddenly cutting edge graphics mean absolutely nothing. Reflections mean nothing. And I just think the reason why I'm bringing respect is because if you think about it, what is it that gamers respect the most at the end of the day? I mean, really think about that collectively. All gamers, what is it that they respect the most at the end of the day? Pushing Polygon says, great gameplay. Exactly. Exactly. That, like, we talk on this channel about all different things. And I know that a lot of people assume that, because I'm a PlayStation fan, first and foremost, that if a game doesn't have good graphics, then I'm not even paying attention to it. It's not true. I mean, I will admit that there are times where it's a struggle for me, with certain games, depending. But generally speaking, it just comes down to it. If you want to look at why people are so loyal to Nintendo, why people are so loyal to Sony, and why eventually people will start to become more loyal to Microsoft, it's because they put out games that are great to play. And I know that sounds like, well, duh, but you would be shocked how it's like, dude, that explains literally everything. It explains literally everything. It's why like fanboys get into these like virtual fist fights and shit. Because it's like, if you're a fan of one that's competing with the other, and they both like, what are they fighting over? They're fighting over which game company creates the games that are better to play. And then you see people who are like, dude, I'm buying everything and I'm going to try to play everything. And even the person who buys everything and plays everything, they will notice they gravitate towards one thing or the other. And you'll find that if you ask that person, like, if they say, I spend most of my time on my PlayStation or my Switch or whatever, even though I have everything, if you were to ask them, why is that? They'll come back and they'll say, well, because there's great games to play over there. Like, the games that I play over there are great. And that's, you know what I mean? It's so funny to me how, especially here, like when we're not actually playing video games and we're talking about video games, it's just natural that we will start to branch out and talk about all these other things, because all these other things do encapsulate the industry as a whole. We can't ignore that. But it's just so funny how sometimes you go so far with it. And even I'm guilty of this. You go so far with it that you just forget sometimes that it's like, oh, yeah, it's that simple. And actually, yesterday it was kind of funny for me because, a lot of people, if you go check, I'm sure I'm going to get clowned on for my stream yesterday. I have no doubt about that. But people are even, they're going off in the comments, and I'm like, I'm looking at the response like well after the fact, like I'm totally just chilling, hanging out, and I'm kind of laughing at myself a little bit, and I'm laughing at what people are saying. I'm like, yeah, I guess I did get pretty heated, didn't I? Like, I got really worked up, and I guess it was kind of silly to some people or entertaining or whatever. Some people just love that energy. But it's funny how, like, no matter what I said or no matter what I did or no matter what we talked about, dude, I closed that stream. I went about my business for the day, and towards the end of the day, I booted up Final Fantasy, and I'm just like, this is some great gameplay. You know what I mean? Like that's, it's just funny to me that it just all always, no matter what, just simply comes back down to the same thing. And I just think that there's so many different conversations happening at all times. It can be a lot easier than you would think to get away from that notion. Oh man, really thirsty today. You're saying got serious wars like in Ukraine and got people arguing about consoles. That's the nature of humanity, bro. That's the nature of humanity. We are not able to be everywhere at one time. You ever hear the saying, just focus on your corner of your little corner of the earth, focus on your little. I mean, it can be, people can go too extreme with that. I think it's good to pay attention to what's going on in the world and try to be somewhat aware. But I think at the end of the day, that is a problem for a lot of people. I think for a lot of people, they spend too much time focused, and I do this, I'm guilty of this as well. They spend too much time focused on things that you have no control over, you can't do anything about, and no matter how much knowledge you have, it doesn't change it, and it won't change it. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that, and they end up neglecting the things that they do have control of. You know what I mean? Where it's like, what if you just focused on the things you can control, the things that are in front of you right now, where you can actually make the biggest difference? And that's, I think, so interesting to witness, especially today with the internet, with social media. It's absolutely true, man. It's absolutely true. Like, more than ever, people are totally neglecting the areas within their lives that they can actually make a difference in, not just for them, but for people around them, because they're too focused on things that have literally nothing to do with any of it, So, and that does happen here in the video game universe as well sometimes, man. So, Jay Pierce, 18 man, I'm going to read your super chat. I'm just going to follow up Jay Pierce's real quick. He says, and if Spider-Man comes out and only runs at 30 frames per second, PlayStation fans will never hear the end of it. You can't claim it's the most powerful console and run games at 30 FPS. Sony pushes for 60 FPS and beyond. Maybe the Game Pass effect. Well, this is where it is you're right. If Spider-Man was announced to be 30 FPS, you're right. People would go off, man. They would. And it would be unfair. Straight up, it would be. Because people are not going off right now on Starfield. What would be fair? Here's what would be fair. You ready? It would be fair if right now Starfield's confirmed 30 FPS on the Xbox Series X, and people are saying that's disappointing but understandable. And then if Spider-Man 2 comes out and says this is going to be 60 FPS, I think the fairest response to that would be, that's really disappointing, but understandable. And that's the only real difference there. The reason why I think Spider-Man 2 being 30 FPS would be considered really disappointing is because Insomniac, basically with the previous Spider-Man games and Ratchet & Clank, did not only have 60 FPS modes, but like 120 FPS modes. They had everything. And so to go from that to just now you can't even do 60, it's more of a hit to people, because the expectation is there. And you are not wrong in that the expectation from the world's most powerful console, you would think, would be this should be able to do 60 FPS as well, right? But it can't. But let me ask you again, what's the last game that Microsoft released? And what frame rate was it locked at? You see what I'm saying? You could even make the argument, even though I know Redfall and Starfield are two very different games, you could make the argument that Redfall essentially already set expectations for people in the worst possible way. But everybody, the more I look at it, I almost feel like Microsoft used Redfall as a shield for Starfield. I want you to think about it. I want you to think about this. What if Redfall, what if the whole disaster that happened with Redfall didn't happen like that? You know what I mean? Like, what if the game was canceled, it never came out, and then so all we would be left with is a situation where the first time we're hearing about a game running at 30 FPS on the Xbox Series X is with Starfield. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. I guess I'm just saying that it seems to me like everybody got they got all their anger out and all their frustration, and they took it out on Redfall. And then after that, I think that's why the response with Starfield is so extreme. At least to me, it seems extreme. Where like, dude, people seem to just be like, like they don't care at all. Now that could just be because of how Starfield looks. Like it looks like a really impressive game. So yeah, I don't care at all that it's 30 FPS. But it just seems to me that the fact that Redfall had a barrage of just, like here's a game at 30 FPS that was supposed to be at 60. And everybody just unloaded, man. They absolutely tore it to shreds. They took it to hell and back. You know what I mean? And then Microsoft shows a much better game and they say, and this game can't do 60. It's like people are just so over the moon that like, oh my God, it looks like a good game though. Do you get what I'm saying? It's like it's a psychology thing where we got the double whammy of here's a really fucking bad looking game and it's locked at 30. And then Microsoft comes back 2 months later and they're like, and here's a really good looking game and it's locked at 30. It's like people inherently, because they're coming right off of that scenario of bad games, 30 FPS, now you're being, you're basically being funneled directly into good game 30 FPS. The pill's a lot easier for people to swallow. Just saying. It's, you know what I mean? Salesman tactics. I mean, it kind of is, dude. It's a psychological. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. If anything, it's kind of smart. It is kind of smart. Because I just have a difficult time believing that, like, Microsoft isn't dumb, dude. Phil Spencer's not dumb. I mean, we could say whatever we want about these executives, but they're not stupid. Like, he knew what was wrong with that game. And he knew, like, this shit should be canceled. But I think that they ultimately just inherited that game and they're like, can we use it, though? Like, is there anything we can get out of this? Even if it's on a more, on a deeper layer. Saying conspiracy theories all the time here. Yeah, I guess that's part of it. 18 May, you're saying, sorry I'm late. So you may have touched on this already, but have you seen the news that the FTC is suing to block Frontiers of Pandora free PS5 DLC? Goddamn, 18 May. That one really threw me for a loop. Because I was about to be like, bro, I could have swore I saw you in here earlier when we were talking about that, but no. This just in. The FTC is suing to block the Frontiers of Pandora free PS5 DLC. Sony's got a monopoly on this market, bro. It needs to end here. Thank you, 18 May. That was quite the surprise super chat. I didn't see where that was going. Angry Whale Watcher, you're saying, I finished Octopath Traveler 2 and it was excellent. A great step up from the original. Bravo to the devs. Congrats on 1 million sales. I'm not familiar with Octopath Traveler, but I'm happy to hear that, man. I'm happy to hear that you had a good experience. 1 million sales. That's an indie game, right? That's like really good for an indie game. 1 million sales. That's very good. So yeah, good on them, man. I see somebody asking thoughts on Marlin Gaming Nation. He said Sony can compete with Xbox's COD. Is this right? Um, I mean, we've had this conversation before, but to simplify it, do I think Sony could offer a competent, like relatively solid alternative to Call of Duty? Absolutely. Do I think Sony could just come out and create a game that suddenly sells as well as Call of Duty and has the type of brand recognition that Call of Duty has and the type of loyalty that it has? No. That would take Sony over a decade to achieve. And it would also require a bit of luck. It would require a lot of talent. It would require a lot of money, a lot of support, but it would also require a little bit of luck. Games like Call of Duty, these like really big established juggernauts, they do get where they do get to these levels with a little bit of luck. You know, not entirely, just a little bit. You know, it's like the perfect combination. You're saying X Defiant is shaping up. Yeah, it does look X Defiant does look pretty good. The Mark Shark, you're saying Sony games look and perform so well. I don't even feel like I need a PS5 Pro. That being said, I'd still buy one because why not future proof? Yeah, I guess that's why I titled this stream the way I did, because it's just the timing of it. You know what I mean? The timing of this conversation is really what is important to me, because hearing Phil Spencer say we're not thinking about doing a mid-gen refresh right now, coming after the news that Starfield's at 30 FPS on the Xbox console, and then we're also hearing that Sony is doing a PS5 Pro, I am in agreement with you, the Mark Shark. Like, my worry about the PS5 Pro is that Sony's going to announce it and there's really not going to be a big difference. I think that's why I would find it so interesting if we get to a point where the PS5 Pro becomes the 60 FPS machine and the PS5 remains the 30 FPS machine. A lot of people are saying that that's not possible unless they like change the CPU or whatever. Maybe that's true. But I would agree, man, that like a PS5 Pro right now feels like a hard sell, even to the enthusiast, because you're right. Like Spider-Man 2, I'm pretty sure when I play that game at 60, like assuming it's gonna have a 60 FPS performance mode, when I play Spider-Man 2 on my PS5, I'm pretty sure it's gonna look like really, really, really good and perform really, really well, to a point where I would genuinely be asking myself, like, what would a pro do to this game right now? And that's a PS5 only title. But that's the thing. Somebody mentioned earlier, and I actually didn't touch on this, but it's actually a good question. Um, some people are going to give a simple yes or no, but I still think it's a good question. They said, is it possible that one of the reasons why Sony is holding back many of their game reveals is because of the PS5 Pro? It's because they want to actually reveal these games alongside the Pro. It sounds a little bit like, nah, Sony would never do that. But then I think to myself, but like, let's not forget, because I know people forget things very quickly, and I get it. Things are always moving so quickly, especially on the internet. Think about what people were saying about Spider-Man 2 after that gameplay. That gameplay was PS5 gameplay. There were way more conversations than I would have expected of people questioning, like, but does this have to be PS5 only? Does this really look next gen? You're saying that Venom statue will look good in the background. I agree, Josh. I agree. And that's the conversation that a lot of people were having, or at least quite a few people. I'm sure Sony noticed a little bit. Digital Foundry did their analysis of the Spider-Man 2 gameplay, and they didn't walk away saying this looks like a massive next-gen leap. They said it looks like a pretty iterative leap that still is doing some impressive things that are beyond probably what the PS4 could do, but not like the big next. it does make me wonder if maybe Sony is afraid of the conversation beginning to devolve into, okay, well, we've been impressing people and we've been, really pushing that whole next gen narrative. And then we had to switch it with cross gen, but now we're beyond cross gen. I don't necessarily like, I'll put it to you this way. If we were to create a list of reasons why Sony would hold back their game reveals, that would be at the bottom of my list. Like saving it for a PS5 Pro reveal. That would be at the bottom of my list. Okay. I think something like waiting to see what Microsoft is going to do first is higher on the list. And again, this is all under the assumption that Sony is even that they even are deciding to hold back game reveals. To me, it seems clear they are, but there's no way for me to prove that. Josh, again, you're saying, I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, and I played 45 minutes of the Final Fantasy 16 demo. I'm buying it day one. Incredible game so far, and honestly, an incredible year for gaming. Hashtag PSVR2. Yeah, man. Final Fantasy 16 is the real deal. You could just everything about it, man. Like I said earlier, it screams AAA production value. It's interesting. It's Square Enix, but it feels like a Sony game in a way. If you guys know what I mean by that, like it just has that. Like you can tell they care very much about like we want to make sure this game feels like a real AAA banger, so to speak. And it's like the game just kind of does a 1-2 punch in this demo that I've noticed. And apparently people are telling me the best part of the demo is actually the end of it, which I haven't gotten to yet. But the demo, like, it makes me wonder, we heard that report apparently that Square Enix was like nervous, right? Like they're like nervous about the pre-orders for Final Fantasy 16. But I have to imagine this demo is going to convince quite a few people. I mean, Josh, you're a perfect example. You're somebody who, you're saying you weren't really a Final Fantasy guy. I assume that means you weren't really planning on buying it, or at least maybe not day one. And now you're like, damn. I think the demo was a very smart move. I think, and especially the fact that your progress carries over. I think it's making it very, very easy for people to just be day one buyers. And yeah, I think I wasn't trying to rush through the demo. I know I'll probably complete it today, but I was like trying to play it like really incrementally to just build up to the launch. Because once I finish the demo, I'm still gonna have a little bit of waiting to do, about a week, roughly, a little over a week. But I'm happy to hear that, man. And you're right. This year is a huge game, a huge year for games. 2023, I think, is probably going to go down as one of the best years for gaming ever, all things considered. So, that just reminds me, guys, did you see apparently, Silent Hill 2 Remake, the release date was leaked. Now, take this with a pinch of salt, but an Australian retailer put up Silent Hill 2 Remake with a release date of September 29th of this year. Now, the thing that's weird about that is that's a oddly specific date. That's not a placeholder date. I think it was taken down. And so a lot of people are thinking that like this retailer may have accidentally just revealed the release date. My thoughts on this, I'm 50-50. Like I could see that being the date because that actually lines up pretty well. However, if that is the release date, it means Konami's going to announce it very soon. Because if retailers already have their pages up, you know what I mean, with a date and everything, it means that would mean that Konami is like literally about to start talking about it. And so if we don't hear anything from Konami in regards to Silent Hill 2 Remake in the next couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks, then I think it's safe to say that was just a mistake. But I just want to say, man, if we find out that Silent Hill 2 Remake is launching this year, the second half of this year for Sony is looking pretty incredible. Like, it already looks very good, and Final Fantasy 16 is the start of it. Like, again, you look at the second half, Final Fantasy 16, Helldivers. I want a release date for Helldivers 2, please. That game looks really fun. And Spider-Man 2. But if you're telling me we're also going to throw Silent Hill 2 remake in the mix, dude, that's pretty massive. That's pretty massive. Arguably one of the best second halves of the year for Sony ever, if they can do that. So I don't know that. And yes, Stellar Blade is also apparently targeting 2023, but we haven't gotten an update for it. Saying PSVR 2 getting some good ones as well. Yeah, that's true. I keep forgetting to mention PSVR 2 and the exclusives that they're getting. Firewall Ultra. I think that game's Synapse. Apparently Synapse is awesome. Saying especially if they launch Foam Stars this year. Dude, if Sony launches Foam Stars this year, it's over. Microsoft, Starfield, they're done. They're done, bro. Crossfire, Sierra Squad. Is that an exclusive for PSVR 2? Carl, you're saying you want the PS5 earbuds? So do I, man. I think they look good. Josh Z, you're saying it's also that Nintendo always strives for quality in every big franchise, outside of maybe Pokemon. Zelda, Mario, DK, Metroid, etc. have maybe less than 5 poor quality games combined in 3 or 4 decades. That is crazy to think, Josh. And I am in agreement with that. Like, and I think, see, that's where I said, like, when it comes to people respecting, like, that garners respect inherently. Like, a publisher caring deeply about the quality of their game and their product, no matter what, especially when it's done consistently decade after decade, that will garner a tremendous amount of respect. And that respect, like I said, man, it leads to loyalty. That respect leads to loyalty. You know, a lot of customers are loyal to Nintendo, even though we know Nintendo doesn't have the greatest business practices. They get a lot of flack for that, but yet they still crush it. And the reason why they crush it is because people respect the fact that they care about the quality of their games, man. You know? And for a lot of people, that's all that matters. That's why that's why honestly, like, when I saw all the discourse happening with Spider-Man 2, it was a little bit bothersome because it's like, what are people talking about, man? It's like now out of nowhere, people are just they're just suddenly questioning Insomniac. Suddenly Insomniac, they're not going to hit the quality bar. It's not going to be as good this time. They're going to drop the ball. They're neglecting all these different things, and it's like, it makes no sense to me. Like, if anything, Insomniac is one of these developers. Now, keep in mind, Josh, I'm not comparing Insomniac to Nintendo or anything like that, but I'm just saying, I think at this point in time, Insomniac has earned enough respect based off of their pedigree, based off of what they've done up until this point, that, like, I think they deserve a little, it's not about credit, but it's like, they deserve the benefit of the doubt. They've earned the benefit of the doubt. And you only earn that by caring about the quality, being consistent, and, being respected, essentially. So that's why I just thought it was nonsensical. And that's why I know a lot of people, when the PlayStation Showcase ended, they expected me. And I know that some PlayStation fans were upset with me that I didn't. That they were like, all right, MBG, like, you like the showcase, right? Like, you could tell me, I can hear some positive PlayStation stuff from you, right? And I was busy being honest and saying I did not like that showcase. And I was busy spending time talking about, dissecting it and dissecting the aspects of the showcase I didn't like. Meanwhile, while I was doing that, all these trolls and all these people are out there just shitting on Spider-Man and trying to tear the one great thing, the one really great standout thing that Sony had from first party. They were trying to tear it down. And naturally, when I was done talking about my thoughts on the showcase, and I was out of my own head basically and giving my own thoughts, and I was looking around, that's why people were like, they're like, oh, you're just flip-flopping. It's like, no, I spent time being critical on the showcase. And when I was done doing that, I noticed that people are now trying to tear Spider-Man down. And I'm like, guys, there was a lot wrong in terms of Sony first party with that showcase. That wasn't one of the things. Like, why? Like, I just thought it was crazy that people were targeting Spider-Man and not targeting, like, damn, like, what was that Concord trailer? You know? Like, no one even talked about it. And that's where I thought, like, I just was like, this shit's all mixed up, man. Like, people are, the trolls are becoming too I don't know. They're gaining too much power out here. You know what I mean? Maybe not though, because when I take a step away from that and I stop paying attention to the trolls, the realization kicks in that, dude, like, that Spider-Man 2 gameplay garnered over like 20 million total views, bro. It's like, oh, well, fuck. Like, I don't think Sony has anything to worry about. Trolls gain power when you feed them. Ah, yes. And that's the problem, man, is I think that's why it's so easy for me to get caught up in it, is because I notice, like, people do feed that shit. Like, when I would, like, go on Twitter and I would see, like, there's a literal trending tweet of somebody calling out, like, I don't know, like, something about the water in Spider-Man 2. I'm like, you could have tweeted anything about Spider-Man 2. And that's what you tweeted. Okay, you're a troll. But then I noticed, this is a trending tweet? Like, what is happening? Really, dude? I love how some dude just comes in here spamming, Game Pass is the best deal in gaming. Like, bro, you're at the wrong channel, man. Like, if you were to go spam that shit in an Xbox channel, they'd probably make you a mod. You gotta go. You're literally at the wrong place. You're at the wrong place, man. That's funny. So yeah, I appreciate the super chat, Josh. Salvazardo6, you're saying with X Defiant looking good and the possibility of the Outlaws and Avatar game turning out good, do Ubisoft now become a more attractive acquisition? I will say the one thing that Ubisoft has going for them, it is what you mentioned. It's the fact that they are like, they have this partnership with established brands and franchises. And that's exactly what Sony looks for, man. That is Sony's bread and butter. It's like, we want big brands, big franchises, things that are gonna garner a lot of attention. And yeah, that Star Wars game, god damn. And I see a lot of people are hyped for the Avatar game. X Defiant is looking pretty good. I don't think X Defiant is just going to blow up and be the next Call of Duty, but it seems like a potentially viable competitor. And that's pretty cool. So I don't know. Maybe, just maybe. The problem with Sony buying Ubisoft, though, is it is like, you have to remember that we could look at that Star Wars game, we could look at the Avatar game, and we could look at X Defiant. We could look at all the good things that Ubisoft has going for it. But what Sony's going to look at is, can we see your financial reports? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what Sony's going to look at. And when it comes to Ubisoft's financial reports, they're going to look at the bottom line. And the bottom line with Ubisoft is they're struggling, man. They're really not doing great. And there's a myriad of reasons for that. And if Sony, if they were to make some type of major play to try to get like Ubisoft, they have to weigh the pros and the cons. So yeah, it might be a pro. We could get that Star Wars game and make it exclusive. Or probably not, actually, because it's already established it's a multi-plat game. But the next Star Wars game, maybe. Or maybe not, because it's Star Wars and we don't own it. Ubisoft doesn't own that. What about Avatar? Same thing, dude. It's important to understand that Ubisoft doesn't own these games. They have the license to them, and ultimately Sony won't be able to dictate. Just like that Indiana Jones game, right? Like Microsoft has an Indiana Jones game that is in development, and it's been in development before Bethesda was acquired. That's going to be multiplat because that's not Microsoft's choice. You know what I mean? Maybe they could have renegotiated and convinced them to make it exclusive, but this is where it's like I think at the end of the day, Sony would absolutely avoid Ubisoft simply because there's just too much overhead, there's too much baggage, and I think that's the thing, man, is Sony is not a company that just makes big risky moves like that. They just don't. Like, I've really been thinking about this. There's been so much talk over the past couple of years about Sony potentially buying a publisher, but I think the realization that I'm having is that Sony doesn't do stuff like that, dude. They just simply don't. Like, they do not make big risky moves like that. And some people might think that's a bad thing, but it's not. If anything, it makes it the most sense. Sony is not a multi-trillion-dollar company that can just have tens of billions of dollars written off and be perfectly fine. That's not Sony. Sony is a billion-dollar corporation that they can afford to take some losses at certain moments if need be, but they have to be very aware of, like, we're either making money or we're losing money. And business can be tricky, but a lot of people have been saying recently that Sony just isn't worried right now. In fact, I saw quite a few people over the past like 48 hours leave comments and stuff and replies basically saying like, dude, chill. Like, I don't think Sony's not worried, man. Like, Sony, and that's the thing is, like, I have this conversation over and over again with you guys about, well, like, okay, Xbox just had that awesome showcase. Does that mean Sony's going to respond now? And I know that this is going to suck to hear, but keep in mind, it's just, I'm just one random dude. I'm an armchair analyst here. I have no inside scoop on Sony's plans. I'm sure we're going to learn more about what Sony may or may not do for the remainder of the year. Right now, PlayStation fans, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of PlayStation fans genuinely feel strongly that Sony really should do another showcase before the end of this year, because that showcase they just did was unacceptable. And now their competition just did their showcase and people are fucking going berserk about how good it was. The tables have turned here at this moment in time where all of the positive talk is focused on Xbox and the Xbox show and the Xbox games and Bethesda and Starfield. And right now, yeah, there are people talking about Final Fantasy, and there are going to be people that will be talking about Final Fantasy once it launches. And maybe that'll be enough to just, once again, make the pendulum swing in the other direction. But the fact of the matter is, in terms of showing, remember how we talk about showing and then telling? In terms of showing, Sony dropped the ball, Microsoft didn't. We have to think about the telling part, though. And this is where, as much as I hate to admit this, and I hope I'm wrong, I want to make it clear, like, I really hope I'm wrong, because if I'm right, well, it means Sony's not doing anything for the rest of the year in terms of showing. I think Sony is perfectly happy with the remainder of 2023 and the way it looks. I think from Sony's perspective, it's all about Spider-Man 2 and Final Fantasy 16. And everything in between is more than enough to sell PS5s and to keep the revenue flowing and to keep the ball just rolling. You know what I mean? And I think it really caps off, like, the exclamation point comes with Spider-Man 2. That'll be doubly true if it turns out that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is actually launching in January of next year. I'm telling you, the fact that we got that Final Fantasy Rebirth trailer, I'll be brutally honest with you guys, and I know that this might kill some people's hope. That, to me, pretty much confirmed we're not getting another showcase this year. We're not, because think about it. If Sony if Sony is going into the end of this year with Spider-Man in October, and then less than 3 months later, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, realistically, Sony doesn't have to do anything until like March or April, or maybe even May of next year. I think waiting a whole year would be pushing it, but that's the truth, man. Is this year for Sony is set, and especially if we get Silent Hill 2 remake. If Silent Hill 2 remake really is going to launch in September, we're set, man. And even at the beginning of 2024, if they are like, yeah, we got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth dropping in January, there's no rush, man. Like, will Sony have to contend with Starfield and Forza Motorsport? Yes, they will, but they literally are right now. What does Microsoft have? Their competition has Starfield and they have Forza. Okay, what does Sony have? They have Final Fantasy 16 and Spider-Man 2. And we could throw Helldivers 2 in there for good measure. And on Microsoft's side, we could throw Age of Empires 4. So it's pretty even. Like, I know that people were going to dive into the conversations as we have about like, well, is Starfield bigger than Spider-Man 2? Well, I think those conversations are irrelevant because here's the truth, right? And I know that this is maybe unexciting, and I know it's not like the ranty version of MBG that everybody loves and everybody likes to cheer on or clip and make fun of. Reasonable MBG here says that the truth of the matter is both Sony and Microsoft are golden for the next like 6 months, dude. They're golden. They are. And for the people like me who are always ready for like the next major reveal and always ready to like get hype and cheer the next major show on or whatever, especially now because, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but I know because I thought that PlayStation Showcase was disappointing. That's the truth. They are absolutely golden. Sony's going to fucking kill it with Spider-Man 2. They're going to kill it with Final Fantasy 16. And they're going to kill it with third-party games. And so is Microsoft. Microsoft is now going to kill it the second half of this year. Maybe not. I don't know how they'll do in July and August. But they'll probably do pretty well. Because a lot of people are going to go out and subscribe to Game Pass and buy consoles for that September Starfield launch. And then they have Forza for their core Xbox audience. And Xbox also has a bunch of third-party games. That's it, man. That's it. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's not. It's just that it's the only thing that's difficult for me to accept about that is the same thing that was difficult for me to accept in 2022. Because, dude, it was so funny how last year people were like, bro, MBG, I know you don't want to accept this, man, but I don't think Sony's having a showcase this year. And I was like, in denial. I'm like, no. Impossible. No way. And they didn't. And I think that the most difficult thing as a PlayStation fan right now is it's not this year, because this year looks very good, in my opinion. I'm like, gaming wise, I'm fucking set, bro. And I get that. Like, people are always like, dude, how come you can't just sit back and enjoy what you have? Trust me, I am. I don't stream 24/7. Like, I'm enjoying my gaming life. Trust me. It's just, I really am jealous, as I said, of the fact that Xbox seemingly got a pretty decent roadmap. Xbox fans, that is. Granted, they have been waiting a lot longer. That's true. I can't deny that. Like, they have been waiting a lot longer, so I guess it was a long time coming. But I felt like as somebody who waited a year and a half to get that roadmap from Sony, we just simply didn't. We just didn't. Sony did not show what's coming, man, beyond the end of this year. We could, unless you count Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and that's right there why I think, like, dude, you're saying one day MVG will get his roadmap, and that's the tough realization, man, is that, well, there you go. Like, hey, MBG, you're not going to know what 2024 looks like for Sony. And there's a really good chance they're not going to tell you this year what next year looks like for you. and every other PlayStation fan. So you just got to wait. And that's why I'm jealous of the Xbox show, because it's like, damn, dude, I can't, like, it good for them, you know? Like, Xbox laid out 2024 games. Some good ones too that people have been waiting for. Do I think that mean that Sony's not going to have their own games lined up for 2024? The reality is, if as we did yesterday, I'm not going to do it again, but if I sat here and tried to figure out, okay, which games are realistically going to come out for Sony in 2024, we could, but that's not the same as Sony actually like laying it out. You know what I mean? So, oh yeah, is Baldur's Gate 3? I think that is actually a console exclusive. It's not that it's a console exclusive, like they made a deal, but they're just not releasing it on Xbox yet. Mo Guns Jackson, you're saying Microsoft announces games far out, they delay them or go silent, then they show them again at a showcase with CGI trailers, and people go nuts. Like, we don't know about this already. I'm baffled by this. Well, yeah, so that's the thing, man. I do think Sony, look, I know this is going to sound like a fanboy take, but I think it's true. I think Sony has done the smarter thing ultimately here. At least they have tried to, not perfectly, but Sony really seemingly has tried very hard to not announce games too early. They have in some cases, like, I'm not going to pretend that, like I said, Sony hasn't been perfect. Wolverine, KOTOR remake. It seems like Sony is kind of more comfortable announcing like established brands early, but generally speaking, they seem to try real, and they seem to do it to an extent where they are willing to go an extended period of time not announcing anything. And that makes fans like me and others get really antsy. But if you think about it, that's pretty much what they've been doing. Because if we walk away from even PlayStation's most recent showcase, look at what they did show. They showed a game that's coming out this year. And then the 3 other titles they showed, one is marked for 2024. And the other 2, it seems like they, even though it's not confirmation, like, I don't think that anybody is expecting that a game like Fair Games is going to be like a 2025 or 26 game. It would be bizarre if it was, and it could be, but it just seems like, generally speaking, most people walked away thinking that these 3 games, like Marathon, Concord, and Fair Games, like, these are games that are likely coming in the next 1.5 years. Maybe not. I mean, there's always a possibility they might not be, but I just do wonder if how much that also factors in, where it's like, maybe Sony had to make the decision where they're like, we could have a kick-ass showcase and we could show like 3 of these games, like Santa Monica's new IP, Ghost of Tsushima 2, but the reality is none of these games are coming until the earliest 2025. It's tough because it's like, a part of me would be like, yeah, that would be awesome, because just knowing about it. But I also kind of understand the whole idea of like, but what if they announced it and then you just didn't have to wait very long for it? So I get what you're saying, Mo Guns Jackson. It's I do want to say this. I have to say this. And fuck it, I don't care, man. Like, call me a fanboy, but I've noticed more people that you would consider unbiased and people who have bigger followings. I noticed that they have started to come out and say, you know, there really isn't a huge difference, like, between CGI and in-engine like footage, especially now because games graphics are so good. And I just am noticing that, like, yeah, more people are kind of beginning to, I think, wake up a little bit and be like, you know, some of that stuff, not all of it, and this isn't trying to take credit away from Xbox, but it's just calling a spade, where it's like, you know, if you're watching something that looks like it's either a cutscene or, you know, an in-engine, in-game scenes, but it's not really showing you the breadth of the game and the gameplay, it's understandable and reasonable. And I know people are going to try to turn this into semantics. It's actually not. This is not semantics. I want to make that clear. If Sony announces their new like Santa Monica's new IP, right? And they say this is in-engine, and it's basically like cutscene footage, it'll be exciting and very cool, but we can objectively say, I still don't know what this game is in terms of gameplay. So there is a difference between CGI and in-engine, but from a viewer's perspective, it's understandable that when people see essentially what are cutscenes from games where they can say it's not CGI, it's in-engine, it's in-game, that's nice because you know how the game's going to look, but you still don't, you know what I'm saying? So you're saying MBG you're reaching. Do you think Marathon will look anything like its CGI trailer? In-engine is better than CGI. I'm not, keep in mind, Pyramid Scheme, I'm not saying it's the same. I'm saying that when people walk away, right? Like, they're still going to be left with the most important question, which is, that looked cool, but what is the game? It's a video game that's meant to be played. What is that like? So you mentioned Marathon. Like, I'll be honest with you, I actually kind of do expect Marathon to look pretty close to what we saw in that CG trailer. Like the colors, the art style. Obviously, that was presented as a cinematic, you know, where you're watching somebody running and they get sniped. But I'm just imagining that it's like, the difference is you're seeing everything from a first-person perspective. Now, that would have been cool. Seeing like a CG trailer from the actual perspective of like simulating like what the gameplay could look like, that would be cool. Maybe that would be questionable though. Maybe people will get pissed about that. But I'm just saying, like, I can't say that somebody like Mo Guns Jackson is wrong when he basically is pointing out that, you know, when you see these in-game or in-engine cutscenes and you stack them up against CGI trailers, it is understandable that people generally are going to be like, I'm not sure. You know what doesn't help, though? You know what the craziest thing is? This is why I question why there even is a need for CG trailers. Dude, graphics today are getting so good that if you look at a cutscene and where you were to tell me like that's CGI, I might believe that's CGI. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I wonder why CGI even is a thing. I don't know if it's just easier, it takes less time to produce. I'm not sure. But from the viewer's end, it's understandable why people would say, I'm not sure what the difference is, really. So, Review Scientology USA, you're saying, MBG, not going to lie, Microsoft just buying up studios is concerning. They said they will continue to acquire studios. In your opinion, what's Sony's approach to combat this? It's a great question, Review Scientology USA. And you know what? Here's the thing. People say that I cry a lot and I bitch and I whine and I moan and I have all the salt and whatever. And I won't lie. I have. I've put that out here publicly. It's no secret that I despise Microsoft's way of going about growing their gaming business. But here's the problem. And this is what people try to, like, people who aren't trying to like clown on me. This is what they like, what people are actually trying to like give me a reasonable answer. They say, but it doesn't matter because it's all fair in business. That's what this is. It's business. It doesn't just happen in the video game industry. It happens everywhere. It's capitalism. It's the market, man. Like, it happens in sports. It happens everywhere. Money talks. That's the reality. And I've made arguments in the past that I still stand by, but I realize that I just don't know that it matters in the grand scheme of things, where I've said, like, is there nothing to be said for both Sony and Nintendo spending decades building up studios and building up to new IP and growing that IP, and not, because the thing that has always kind of bothered me the most about this conversation, and people still do it, where they actually try to tell me that Sony has done in the past the same thing that Microsoft is doing now. And I think that's laughable. I think it's laughable because it's like, when did Sony buy a publisher? When did Sony buy like 7 or 8 valuable IP at one time? When did they do anything like that? They've never done anything like this. Neither has Nintendo. Have these companies bought individual studios? Yes. Wrestling Mark, you're saying, except in the day, Sony did the same thing. Wrestling Mark, I'm going to have to ask you to elaborate. I mean, in all seriousness, I would like some details. You're saying look it up. Well, what should I look up exactly? Because I will look it up. Because I won't lie. Like, back in the 90s, obviously I was very young. I wasn't paying honestly, I wasn't paying any attention to the gaming industry except for just playing games. But I'm curious, what should I look up? Because I don't quite understand, man. Wrestling Mark, that doesn't help me, bro. Wrestling Mark says make Google your friend. Like, you're saying PlayStation screwed over Nintendo with Final Fantasy? That's all I remember. Well, nothing's changed. Seems like nothing has changed. You're saying, what's the difference? See, this is a good question, but I think it has a good answer. What's the difference between acquiring 8 studios at once or 8 individually over time? Here's the difference, okay, in my opinion. And I know not everybody agrees, but this is why I stand by what I say. When I look at Sony and the way that they've slowly, methodically over the years have purchased studios here and there, like they haven't bulk purchased studios or publishers. When we look at Naughty Dog, for example, what year did Sony buy Naughty Dog? They bought them in 2001. What was Naughty Dog known for? Crash Bandicoot. I want you to now think about where Naughty Dog started when they were purchased by Sony. Look at where they are now. And then I want to ask you one simple question. When you think about the games that Naughty Dog has brought out over time, games like Uncharted, games like The Last of Us, okay? When I ask this question, I expect to see only one answer. And if I see any others, it's going to be just people lying and trolling. Do you think Sony helped Naughty Dog get there? Do you think Sony is responsible for helping Naughty Dog achieve what they did with Uncharted and what they did with The Last of Us? There's only one answer to that question. There's only one answer to that question. The answer is yes. Unequivocally yes. Objectively yes. Is Sony entirely responsible? No. Because no publisher is entirely responsible. Publishers don't develop games. Publishers fund the development of games. Publishers are the more business side. The developers, they're the artists. They're the craftsmen. Sony grew Naughty Dog. Let's talk about Sucker Punch. 2011 was the year that Sony bought Sucker Punch. Let's look at where Sucker Punch started. Let's look at where they are now and where they're headed. Right? Same thing. Same exact thing. And Exley 3000. Actually, 3,000 comes in out of nowhere with a haymaker, dropping 10 memberships. Love to see it, man. Thank you so much for that, actually. Guys, let's get some W's in the chat. Man, crazy Arnold for actually 3,000. Really appreciate that. Bringing us up to, yeah, are we getting a membership train going? You guys let me know. But bringing us up to 12 on the day. Love to see it, man. Actually just came out of nowhere with that. Shout out to you, actually, 3,000. Thank you for the continued support, buddy. You know, this is why ultimately when people think that I have a problem with Microsoft putting games into Game Pass. And Jay Pierce gets it going too, man. 11 memberships, just like that. Thanks to Exley3000 and Jay Pierce. Jay Pierce is paying it forward. Thank you so much for that, man. Let's get some W's in the chat for Jay. Appreciate the support, guys. We'll see. We'll see if we can hit our goal today. If you guys are feeling inspired by Exley and Jay, by all means, consider gifting some memberships. That's my whole thing, though, is I am not against Microsoft and their endeavor to grow and succeed with Game Pass. And I'm not against people being excited to get a better deal on the games that they usually buy to get them through Game Pass. To me, there are question marks. There are some concerns. But generally speaking, I get it, man. Microsoft is out here giving you a deal that's ultimately, seemingly, going to save you some money. I'm not against that. And Hellbound 1981. Thank you, dude. I see you guys always coming in to support. Thank you so much, Hellbound. Hellbound just drops another 5 gifts, bringing us up to 18 on the day. 18 on the day. Just like that. Thank you so much, man. Yeah, we got a membership train going now. With Crazy Arnold, too. We'll do a... Let's get a little Jim Ryan in there. I feel like I haven't played the Jim Ryan one in so long. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys so much. We're very close now. We're very close to hitting our goal for the day. Saying MBG has great supporters. Absolutely, man. Absolutely. We have an awesome community here. I know people have their opinions, but I don't think they get it. I don't think they get it. But that's my whole thing, man, is I just feel that things are a little bit unfair with the way it's happening. And I know that people don't care about that, and I can't make them care. And Exley does it again, dude. You guys are doing it. Exley3000 comes in again with another 5 memberships gifted. Guys, let's get some W's in the chat. Look at these guys. We need to get some W's in the chat because we just went from, I think, 1 or 2 members to now we are about to hit our goal for the day. We're about to hit our goal for the day. And Hellbound 1981 does it again as well. Drops another membership gift. That brings us to 24, guys. We're at 24. Who wants to be the one? Who wants to be the one to get us to 25? I know somebody wants to do it. Go for it, guys. W's that Jay does it, man. Jay comes in. Jay's like, I got you, man. Love to see it. Thank you so much for that. That's awesome, dude. Really appreciate the support, guys. There we go. We did it. We hit the goal today, man. Just like that. Just like that. Yeah, Jay Pierce swooping in. Have to do a holy shit for that. Really appreciate that support, guys. Appreciate that membership train. I'll give you one more. So I see some people asking, what do you mean unfair? Well, listen, look. I'm not naive. I'm not as naive as people think I am. I know life isn't fair, and I know that things are not perfect. And I am well aware that just because Nintendo and Sony have done things in a way that I think is respectable. Now, don't get me wrong. I think people misinterpret what I say. I'm not trying to make it sound like Sony is a great, nice company and they've never done any wrong or they've never done bad things, or Nintendo is a great, nice company and they've never done things wrong. No, like business is business. But I'm just saying, it just seems like to me throughout the decades, Sony and Nintendo have they established a formula, and the formula is simple. The formula is you have to slowly and methodically over time build up studios and acquire talent, and you have to nurture that talent, and you have to nurture your teams, and you have to respect the art form that is game creation, and you have to respect your intellectual property, and you have to handle it with care. These are all things that as a fan and a consumer, I can look at and say, that's respectable. And I agree with it because it works. And it ultimately produces what I think we all want. And that's why over the years, people have always wondered, like, dude, why are you always so hard on Microsoft? And it's like, because think about what I've been asking them to try to do for all these years. It's exactly that. And I always go back to this. People say, dude, you don't want Microsoft to compete. You're just against them buying studios. Like, it's okay when Sony buys studios, but not okay when Microsoft does it. Not at all. Not at all. In fact, in 2018, and this is, I think, really worth reiterating right now. Back in 2018, when Microsoft, I think it was Phil Spencer at E3 2018, he announced they acquired 5 studios. Or they built one, they built the initiative, they acquired Playground, Undead Labs, almost said Playground again, Ninja Theory, and Compulsion. I remember when they did that, I was like, now I respect that. I respect that a lot, because that is, number one, Microsoft showing a commitment to their gaming brand. Number two, Microsoft realizing that they do need more studios to produce more content. And number three, most importantly, they acquired studios that are potentially diamonds in the rough. That if these are studios that they can grow over time and potentially create top tier studios. Like I remember when I heard that they did that, I really was like, this is it, man. Like, this is going to be the turning point for Xbox, and it's going to be a long road from here. But that was the first proof to me that they actually get it. Like, they now know you need to have more studios and you need to start investing in these smaller to mid-sized studios and grow them. And you might not compete right away, but if you do it right and you take that first step, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with one, you're going to get there. And I thought that that was the path forward. And then after that, I learned very quickly that that's not Microsoft's plan. Microsoft's plan is, now we're going to go for Bethesda. And even with Bethesda, I kind of thought like, Bethesda wanted to be sold, and I could see why Microsoft would want to go after them, and I could even understand Bethesda, but now, to me, things have just changed with Activision, and I get it. Like, believe me, I know that people are gonna be like, dude, it doesn't matter, just accept it. This is how it is, man. Like, you can't stop it. You can't stop it. This is how everything works. It doesn't matter if you think it's unfair that this is how Microsoft wins, or that this is how Microsoft competes in a big way. They chose not to do it the same way as Sony and Nintendo. And it may even seem unfair in the fact that, well, like, I remember somebody in my chat yesterday, they kept mentioning, well, Sony could do what Microsoft's doing. Like, they could have bought Bethesda, and they could have, and I guess you're right. To some extent, Sony could do it, but they're not. And so I just think it's just a hell of a thing, truthfully, to see Microsoft get the type of praise that they're getting right now for Starfield. Am I the one that said the buck stops with Microsoft? Yes, and that is true. I'm not taking that back. I'm not walking that back. Because it is true. It doesn't matter what I actually think. That is the fact of the matter. They own Bethesda. They own Starfield. It's theirs, and they get the credit for it, no matter what. But when we put that aside, we're not dumb. We all know Microsoft didn't make Starfield. And that, I know when I say that, that triggers some Xbox fans. It's just a fact. Microsoft did not create Starfield. Bethesda did. Todd Howard did. Bethesda's development team did. Is it Xbox's game and they get the credit for it now? Absolutely. Is it an Xbox exclusive? Absolutely. But it is a hell of a thing that when I'm sitting here after the Xbox showcase and I'm saying, God damn, Starfield looks huge. You're saying that's doublespeak? Two things can be true at the same time. I don't think that's doublespeak. Microsoft can have had very minimal impact on Starfield's development because they were not involved with it until the very end to maybe help with some optimization. And it can also be true that it's now their game and they own it and they get the credit for it. You know? I know that to pretty much everybody, it doesn't matter. Like, no one cares, seemingly, that Microsoft is now going to use Starfield as the first real way to get the Xbox brand back on track, to be a major competitor. And I know that it doesn't matter if I say, well, that doesn't seem right. That seems like a cheap way out. Who cares? You're saying, what's wrong with that? And that's just it, isn't it? Isn't that just the question of the day? What's wrong with that? Now we are getting into the weeds of ethics, morals. That's like asking a person, you know, it's like when you look at human beings, you ever notice how a person can do something and two onlookers can look at what that person did. One person can say, I don't see anything wrong with that. And another person can say, I think there's definitely something wrong with that. And then those two onlookers begin to argue because they disagree. One person sees something as wrong, the other person sees it as totally fine. If anything, it just reveals, in my opinion, human nature. And that's all this really comes. I know it seems strange to think, like, how did we go from talking about video games to talking about studio acquisitions to talking about now ethics and human morality? It's because, dude, it's not difficult. Like, I can see both sides of the coin. I guess I just wonder, does everybody else see it that way? Does everybody else realize? You're saying you think Sony has ethics? No, I do not. They are a business. I understand that ethics do not exist in business. However, here's an important note. If ethics don't exist in business, or at the very least, logic dictates that business is business, what the fuck do ethics have to do with it? Who decides that ethics need to matter? That there needs to be an ethical approach? Who decides that? I'll tell you who decides that. The people do. the customers, the consumers. You think businesses are doing nice things? And do you think businesses care about their image because they just want to be the superhero? They want to be they want to be the right business. They want to do the right thing. Don't get me wrong. There are human beings that run these companies. I'm sure there are people that actually do have morals and ethics in business. But generally speaking, a lot of people don't expect that. And so what I think it just comes down to is, in a way, that is the question. Do we accept? Do we not accept? What do we consider okay? What do we consider not okay? What do we consider right? What do we consider wrong? You're saying, MBG, we don't sit in on the board meeting, so we don't know. You're right about that. So the only thing I can do is just put myself in, let's say, like Phil Spencer's shoes, right? I seriously because I'm seriously trying to think to myself, like, how would I feel, truthfully, as like a human, as a person, if I was the head of gaming for Microsoft, making good money, obviously, you're top executive position at Microsoft. So it's like, it's not just about money. Clearly, needs are taken care of. There has to be something here. This is about my career and the business and the gaming industry. So a lot of people say, like, Phil Spencer, he cares about the industry, and I believe that. I think that most people who are involved in the gaming industry actually, to an extent, do care. Not everybody. And I think to myself, if I was on that side of the fence and I inherited a fucking dumpster fire from the person before me who nearly killed the brand, and I basically reached a point where Microsoft's CFO and CEO say to me, you can make some purchases, Phil, if you want. We'll support that. Like, we have the money to be able to facilitate that. So if you want to start making some phone calls and start finding ways to get more content in the Game Pass, you should do that. And I would think, okay, well, I'll go look around. And I see that Bethesda is possibly looking to be acquired. I completely understand. Like, I believe, and trust me, like, because I'm really thinking about it. Like, I completely understand from that perspective. You're in third place, you're struggling, and you have this new business model that needs content. Why wouldn't buying Bethesda feel like the right thing? And I also understand the other side of it, where it's like, and then after Bethesda, it's all about Game Pass now. So it's like, the goal is we need even more content for Game Pass. So now I'm hearing that Activision might want to be sold. Maybe we could do that. Let's see if we can get that done. And not everybody's happy about that. And you come out and you say, no, we'll keep our games there. Like, we're not taking we're not taking the games away from anybody. We're just looking to put them into our own service. That's the point. Maybe. Hellbound saying he's got to go. I appreciate it, man. Thank you for coming in at the end thank you for being here the whole time, I'm assuming, but for coming in at the end with some membership gifts, man. I really appreciate that. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow or the next day. So it's like, from that point of view, I can understand where it's like, look, I know what's driving decisions and I understand the business side of it. I just can't help from my perspective. I'm not I'm not Phil Spencer, right? Like, I'm not the head of PlayStation. I'm not the head of Xbox. I'm just an onlooker. And as an onlooker and just viewing the landscape, all I can see is simply this. for the past decade, Sony has built up their studios and they've been firing on all cylinders, and they've seen tremendous success from doing that. And to me, most of it seems well earned. Nintendo has continued to find success by doing that exact same thing, building up their studios, releasing games, being consistent, making sure it's about quality, but also a little bit of innovation in the hardware space. And when I look at Microsoft and I truly try to think, like, what did they bring to the table? They've only brought, for the past like decade, in my opinion, most of the time, like 8 times out of 10, mediocrity. And I guess I always just imagined that the way out for Microsoft and Xbox was, I never believed that Xbox would always be mediocre. I never believed that. I always believed that Xbox would eventually make a comeback. I just never seriously considered that the way that would happen is by essentially buying stuff that is guaranteed to be a win and basically slapping the Xbox logo on it and saying, see, we can do it too. I never thought that that's actually what would happen. And I guess somewhere in my mind, I kind of thought to myself, like, even if they did try to do that, I don't think everybody would be okay with that. You know, where it's like, it's pretty cheap. It's a cheap tactic. Well, technically, it's an expensive tactic, but it just feels like it's a shortcut. You know, it is essentially a pay-to-win tactic. And I always kind of thought that more people would see that and kind of come to the conclusion that that's kind of weak, dude. Like, where's the gumption here? You know, where's the tenacity? Where's the soul in this? And that's when you realize that there is no fucking soul in this, dude. This is a multi-trillion-dollar business that just cares about the bottom line, man. And they don't want their brand to die. There's no fucking soul here. And that's where I realized that, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that means Sony, they have soul everywhere. No, if Sony was on the ropes, they would do some shit too. But let's not fucking pretend. And this is truly where I feel like people want to bring up the past and people want to talk about how Sony did this and that to Sega and everything. It's like, look, I've always said Sony is not fucking innocent, man. They are not. Nintendo isn't innocent. Sony, these are corporations. It's corporate. Ethics only matter when it's convenient for them to matter. But when the fucking shit hits the fan and it's time to get cutthroat, that's what happens. But you know what? The one thing I can at least say about Sony, and no one can deny this, is that when they were on the fucking ropes, when they were on the ropes with the PS3 in the beginning, and I know, before anybody says it, well, it's because they couldn't afford to do it. If they could, they would have. You're probably right. But we're not playing the whataboutism here, right? Like, when Sony was on the ropes and they had, what did they have to do to win? I'm serious. What did Sony have to do to win? One thing. Just one thing. You're saying it's a great rant, but the people here listening are on your side. It's not. That's the thing, man. I don't think this is about sides. I mean, I guess it kind of is, because it's like I'm talking in a way where it's like you're either for or against the Activision Blizzard deal. But I'm trying to just basically highlight something that is just true, man. And that is the only thing that Sony could do to dig themselves out of that fucking hole was make good fucking games. That's it. And they started doing that with the PS3 at the end. And they realized we should probably do the same thing with the PS4. And that's what Sony did. They said, let's make some great games. Now, is it as innocent as that? No. Was Sony striking third-party deals? Yes. Were they trying to take every advantage they could? Yes. No one here, nor am I, saying that this stuff isn't expected. But the reality is Microsoft tried to do that and they failed. And do you know what? If it wasn't for Game Pass, Xbox would be dead. If it wasn't for Phil Spencer, Xbox would be dead. I get that. I get it. And I guess some people are asking me, what's the point here? Well, truthfully, the point is I've come to the realization that no matter my personal feelings on what Microsoft is doing with their money in the video game industry, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And it's not about integrity. It's not about ethics. It's not about, well, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. It's just simply about what gets the fucking job done. What are we able to do? Because a lot of people have said to me, they're like, dude, you think if Sony had Microsoft money, they wouldn't be doing the same thing? And I can't say yes or no either way, because they might. Who knows? If Sony did have Microsoft's money, would they have bought Bethesda? Would they try to buy Activision Blizzard? I don't know. Maybe, yeah. I can't say. If I say no, there's always the possibility that you're wrong about that. They absolutely would. I don't know. It's just an interesting conundrum, in my opinion, because I know that people think like, dude, you're just a PlayStation fan that's afraid of Xbox either A, competing, or B, getting ahead of Sony. It's not a matter of the brand. Like, it doesn't matter to me if Nintendo's kicking PlayStation's ass, if Xbox is kicking PlayStation's ass. I actually don't mind PlayStation getting its ass kicked. I don't know if people know that or not. Like, I really don't mind. In fact, sometimes they do need a good ass kicking, right? Any company that spends enough time being number one needs a good humbling from time to time. My only issue is the way in which the ass kicking is happening. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I genuinely feel that the way, like, if after that Xbox showcase, I've seen a lot of conversations from people basically saying that Xbox just beat the shit out of Sony for like the first time. Like, they just came in and they gave it to them. They kicked the door down. Dude, in my opinion, Microsoft's moves here between buying Bethesda and buying Activision, this isn't a boxing match anymore. I feel like in decades past with PlayStation and Sony and Microsoft, it was basically a boxing match and they were trading blows. And for a long time there, it just seemed like Sony was just winning round after round after round after round. You know? Oh, damn, you're saying check the time on your stream, bro. Yeah. All right, I'll go. I still got a little bit of time. They were going round after round after round, and Microsoft just couldn't win a round, dude. They just couldn't do it, no matter how hard they fought, no matter how hard they tried. And this isn't a case of Microsoft took a break or they sat a couple rounds out, and then they came out and they started winning a couple rounds of their own. No, this is like Microsoft went outside, decided to fucking plant C4 around the perimeter of the fucking building with the boxing ring in it, and they're slowly planning to just demolish the entire building. And that's like, you know what I mean? That is like, to me, them trying to get big ass publishers and taking these big ass games that are guaranteed wins. That's what it feels like, dude. It feels like it feels like that's what they're trying to do, you know, where it's like at some point Nintendo and and Sony are in the boxing ring, and they're like looking around like, yeah, and suddenly it's like, yo, where'd Microsoft go? And then before you know it, the whole building just collapses in on them. That's what it feels like. And that is why it's like, it's not a matter of being afraid of like, oh shit, I don't want Microsoft to compete, or oh shit, I don't want Sony to not be number one. Like, dude, I don't care about either of those things. Both of those things I fully expect to happen. I expect Microsoft to compete. I expect Sony to not always be number one and to have to keep working hard to be number one. What I genuinely don't expect is for a company like Microsoft to just walk in and say, we have the most money. We're just going to throw it around and we're going to buy our wins. That's what we're going to do. And you can bitch and cry about that all day. Doesn't matter. It's fair game. And we're doing it. And I get it, man. Like, I understand that people, again, they're going to turn and be like, but why is that wrong? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like, well, I'm not here to sit here and try to go down another rabbit hole and basically talk about all the different nuanced reasons why it may or may not be wrong. I'm just saying that it just ultimately, it feels just not right to me. It feels not great because people always say like, oh, but I bet if Sony bought a publisher and made their games exclusive, you'd be all over that. You're wrong. You're absolutely wrong about that. Even with Bungie, dude, I talked about this. Like, I kind of thought what Sony did with Bungie was a little weird, man. Where I'm like, that, like, I get it. You want something that can guarantee you a W in live service, and I get that it's strategically very smart, but I just thought it was kind of strange when Sony admitted to the fact that we don't want to learn the hard way with live service. And I can rationalize that. I can understand it. It's like, you don't want to step on landmines unnecessarily. You don't want to take a hit to your reputation unnecessarily. And it can do damage to you. I get that. And if you have a way where you can basically pay to make that not happen, I get it. But that to me just kind of felt strange, where it's like, Sony, you're established in the video games industry. You have more experience than than a lot of publishers, and you have all that experience under your belt. Like, maybe you guys should give yourselves a little bit of credit here and think, maybe if you tried to do a good live service game on your own, you could probably figure it out. You could probably do a good job. Maybe not, though. Maybe not. That's where, again, somebody might say you're just naive, and that's asking to fail, and that's asking to die. So yeah. Anyway, I got a couple super chats I missed. This is very long-winded there. I apologize for that. Jay Pierce, you're saying, and you know what? Review Scientology USA. I'm sorry. I don't think I actually answered your question. You said, in your opinion, what's Sony's approach to combat this? There is no combating this, in my opinion. And I think that's ultimately the point that I was trying to get at, is if somebody said to me, you are afraid, MBG, that Microsoft, they're in the process of making moves that are going to put them in a position that Sony can't reach because Sony is incapable of making those same moves. That I agree with. And that is my answer to you, Review Scientology USA, is, what do I think Sony's approach to combat this is? I think it's that I think Sony has no choice but to sit back, watch their biggest competitor that they've had an advantage over for a long time just buy their way to success, and maybe even one day over the next 10 years just blow past them in terms of money and revenue and all this stuff, and they're the market leader at some point in some capacity, and Sony can't do anything about it. Sony will just have to continue to stay the course of making games the way they've always made them, putting out consoles, and trying to just, keep growing their business as best they can. Do I think Sony could buy a publisher? I do. Yeah, we've talked about that. Could they do it? They could. Do I think they will? I do not. at this point in time, I'm 100% convinced Sony will not buy a publisher. I just think it's too risky for them. I think no matter what, Sony sees it as too risky. If there was ever a time for Sony to buy a publisher, it's probably right now. And they're not. So, as far as we know anyway, they're not. Could that change? It could. But I had to make sure to actually answer your question, Review Scientology. Jay Pierce, you're saying, I'm still sticking to my guns. PlayStation will have a showcase or 2 stated plays to make up for it. There's just too much meat left on the bone. So the one thing I will say is, while I'm not confident in a showcase happening, I think we're going to get a state of play at the very least. And that state of play could have a little surprise in there at some point. That would be pretty cool. But yeah, I don't think Sony's going to be dead silent for the rest of the year. That would be really weird. I don't see that happening. So I appreciate that, Jay. And we got Megastar Gaming. You're saying you think Stellar Blade may still make it this year. Well, that's what I mean, is we could maybe see a stated play. Maybe Stellar Blade shows up. It's the perfect place for that game to show up, and they might announce it's coming out in like 2 or 3 months. Or maybe just like a month. It's a possibility. They're cutting it close. We're halfway through the year, so there's still time for them to announce the game and its release date, but we are cutting it close. So I want to say Stellar Blade is still somewhat likely to come out this year, but I wouldn't be shocked if it gets delayed to next year. Let me see. We got Mo Guns Jackson. Again, you're saying, to be clear, I'm okay with CGI or in-engine trailers for games. However, when your game was announced in like 2019 and you show that, I see that as an L. I think that's fair. I'm pretty sure you're talking about Fable here. I'll be honest, man. I know Fable's supposed to be an RPG. I feel no excitement for Fable. Like, I'm in agreement that Fable was announced in like you said, either 2019 or 2018, and this is the first we've actually like seen of it. And we still don't have I don't know, man. I'm not hating on Fable. I'm just saying it. When people thought about we're finally going to see Fable, I really thought it was like we're going to get like a 4 to 5 minute trailer and like half of it's going to be like gameplay, and people are just going to like kind of shock people. It didn't have the wow factor. That's the thing, man. Saying it's a fun and quirky game, more comedic. Yeah, I get that. It didn't have the wow factor that I think I was expecting it to have. But maybe it still will. But I agree with you, Mo Guns Jackson. I think that's totally fair. And Paul Gannell, shout out to you, man. Sorry, I missed. We have Paul Gannell. He came in here and he gifted another membership. Paul Gannell has brought us to 26 memberships on the day. Keeping it going, man. Blowing past the member goal. Thank you for paying it forward, Paul. Guys, we have an incredible audience here. We have an incredible community. You guys have been continually gifting memberships, continually showing your support. So thank you guys for paying it forward and basically inspiring one another and keeping this community going strong. And most importantly, as I always say, thank you for supporting me directly. Anybody who gifts memberships, anybody who becomes a member, anybody who super chats. I know I say it a lot, but it's worth constantly reiterating. You guys are fan funding me directly, enabling me and allowing me to do this. So thank you guys sincerely for that type of support. Let me see. Dick Uboro, you're saying, sir, Psygnosis was a huge publisher at the time. What is that situation? You're not the first person to mention that to me. And I guess maybe this is just where I'm not entirely sure, like, what has happened. Ninja Theory has released a new Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 developer diary. It showcases the studio's performance capture work for the Series X and S and PC sequel and offers an inside look at the game's new trailer. What? I'm not trying to look. I know I sound salty here, but I kind of am. Like, dude, where is this game's gameplay? It's actually getting frustrating, dude. Like, how are they going to show another dev diary? look, are they like saving it because it's going to be like over the top? They're like, oh, dude, wait till people see this. Why are they not showing the gameplay? It's weird, man. It's weird to me. It's actually making me a little bit concerned because it's like this is the game I'm most excited for right now that Microsoft is planning to release next year, and they haven't shown gameplay. It's just frustrating. I honestly I started to feel like this about Spider-Man 2 a little bit, but it's like, and then they showed that gameplay. It's like, oh well, okay. It's just crazy to me. That's all. It's crazy to me that they haven't because I feel like look, maybe I'm remembering wrong. I thought the combat in Hellblade was really fun. I know it wasn't perfect. I thought it was really fun. And that's why I'm just surprised where it's like, dude, I think if you just show some snippets of your combat, people are going to get even more hype for this game. But maybe I'm wrong about that. All right, let me see. We got Magnum Gaming. You're saying Starfield was already being developed, therefore it is the last large-scale game for Game Pass. Elder Scrolls 6 will be greatly reduced in scope. I don't believe that. I don't believe that Elder Scrolls 6 will be reduced in scope, but I don't think Microsoft, I'm not sure that Microsoft is going to have a game anywhere near as big as Starfield releasing anytime remotely soon for their platform. I think Starfield's going to be a game that Microsoft basically relies on for the next like 5 to 8 years as a selling point to get people in the Game Pass. And it could work. I mean, like we talk about, people believe games like Starfield are games that, they're generational games. So I appreciate that, Magnum Gaming. Although I don't agree with you. I would be surprised if the Elder Scrolls 6 is reduced in scope. Top Shot, you're saying Bethesda was in a financial problem where they were bought by Microsoft. There's a good chance Starfield would have not released if Microsoft didn't purchase them because of the financial risk of a new IP. Okay, look, I can't argue against that. People have brought that up, and that is a fair and valid point, and that is, well, if Starfield was going to be that successful, and that much of a winner, then why did Bethesda feel like they had to be sold? I don't know. I mean, I know that Bethesda had a really bad rough patch. They tried to do live service and that blew up in their face, I think, or it just didn't go nearly as well as they thought. And their game, a game like Starfield's taking so long. So I get that, man. Like that's why I know at the end of the day, a lot of people are going to come to the conclusion that it's not wrong, dude. Like what Microsoft is doing is not wrong because these are companies that want to be purchased. And Microsoft is really the only one in a position to turn to them and say, yeah, we can buy you. We will buy you. No problem. And I get that. Like that to me is like the catch-22 of this whole situation where it's like, yeah, they want to be bought, man. Like they're not being bought unwillingly. Like they're not being strong-armed. And I could look, man. A lot of people say I'm completely wrong about this. I'm open-minded enough to understand that I could be wrong. At the end of the day, the way this could all shake out, like 10 years down the line, everything's fine. Sony's still in prime position. They're bigger than they ever have been. Microsoft's doing great, bigger than they ever have been with Xbox. Nintendo's doing great. You know what I mean? Like we that's an ideal scenario. It's tough to envision it going that smoothly. Like I feel like there's definitely going to be some collateral damage somewhere along the line. Because it just sounds too perfect. Where it's like, imagine a future where Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are all growing at a rapid rate, and they're all just, doing perfectly fine. Like, well, that'd be cool, but it seems, I don't know, seems too good to be true. So I appreciate that, Top Shotta. Magnum Gaming, again, you're saying a $1 trillion corporation makes moves that are decades in the making. What if Microsoft planned to be weak after the 360 up until now so that they can acquire? I mean, dude, that is like going major conspiratorial territory. Like that's like major, like, holy shit, we're going to have we're going to have this 20-year plan, this 25-year plan. We're going to just destroy the Xbox brand with the Xbox One. I don't believe that for a second. I think it's pretty funny to imagine, though. But I do think that when you talk about trillion-dollar companies making moves that are years or decades in the making, I think that's what we're seeing now. You know, that's truthfully, that is why I am concerned about industry consolidation. Um, because it's just this idea that like these big, powerful companies, they want to buy up big publishers and they just want to play nice. That like something about that doesn't compute, especially right now when it's like like I get you're going to say that now because you have to look good. You have to seem nice and friendly and like you want to play nice. You want to play ball with everybody. Um in order to get through the regulatory bodies, but I don't believe that. Like to me that just sounds like I don't know, man. I don't think that they want to play nice. And that kind of goes against like what we talked about, where it's like, well, think about business. Is that something we see very often with competition? We see that competitors just want to play nice. They just want to shake hands and pat each other in the back and say, we're all in this together. Not often, no. Quite the opposite. So it's difficult. You're saying play nice with who? Well, mainly with anybody. With anybody. You know, like I do want to reiterate that those contracts that everybody was giving Microsoft, um, you know, like, oh, they're so nice for doing that. Like, dude, they weren't going to do that. They did that because they had to. And then, you know, there are people who say, well, who cares? If they're going to buy them to own them, they shouldn't have to do shit. And it's like, well, all right. I mean, if we're talking about no regulation whatsoever, then yeah, things are going to get fucking crazy. Crazier than we could even imagine. It all just look, it all comes back down to Game Pass, man. Sony doesn't want anything to do with Game Pass. Microsoft absolutely wants everyone to have something to do with Game Pass. Jay Pierce, you're saying they're cheating throwing headbutts. Yeah, that would be another way to visualize it as well. But even that sounds too tame. Sam, thank you for the donation, man. You're saying, let's not forget that MBG was a hardcore Xbox fan. I was for a little while there, yeah. And that's what's weird is like, I'm trying to imagine, like, if I was still an Xbox fan, how would I feel right now? Like, I'm trying to just picture, I never left the Xbox One. I went right to the Xbox Series X. I never bought a PS4. I never, like, invested in PlayStation. I have to admit that, like, yeah, a part of me would be like, yes, Xbox is finally doing it. But that's where it's like deep down, I would know, like, but this kind of isn't what I expected them to do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. If you think about it, like, think about the games that I'm most excited about, you know, from Xbox. Hellblade, State of Decay 3. Why do you think these are the games in particular? What do these games have in common? You know what they have in common? These are games that I absolutely consider diamonds in the rough, man. Like the first Hellblade I thought was a diamond in the rough where there's something here like, dude, this is a great game and they could do so much more with this and make this so much bigger and better than it is in a lot of ways. If and that's why it's like my most anticipated game because it's like, dude, this is a studio that, again, I gave Microsoft a lot of credit for acquiring them because it's like, this is the kind of studio you want to build up. They can go places with Ninja Theory with a game like this. I think State of Decay like is an even better example. Dude, State of Decay was an indie game. It was a $20 Xbox arcade game, and the systems it had, the depth, it was just like, dude, I remember playing. I was like, how is this a $20 game? I'm like, the potential for this game is through the fucking roof if they can grow this. And State of Decay 2, unfortunately, I think it had development issues. They needed to overhaul the engine, and it had to be shrunk down. But that's why I'm like, State of Decay 3. Like, this is a studio, another diamond in the rough. You could, dude, Undead Labs could go on to be one of the strongest and brightest studios in the industry if they're given the right budget and time. And that's why I'm saying, like, this is the stuff I gravitate towards. I don't gravitate most of the time towards, just like it would suck to me. Let me put it to you this way. It would kind of suck to me a little bit if Sony's holiday game, Spider-Man 2, if it was like, if Spider, think about, let's go back to 2018 Spider-Man. 2018 Spider-Man, yeah, Sony got a lot of credit. And it's under, just in the same way that Xbox is going to get a lot of credit. But here's the truth. This is just a hard fact, man. It's just the way it is. Sony didn't make Spider-Man 2018. Insomniac did. Sony funded Insomniac, and they probably helped them. And they partnered with them. But Sony didn't own Insomniac. I'm sure after they made that partnership, they funneled a lot of resources to them and gave them everything that they needed. So it probably, like, honestly, when Sony was working with Insomniac for Spider-Man 1, it probably wasn't that much different than if they had acquired them. But now, they acquired them in what, I think 2019 or 2018 or something like that. And they've owned them for quite a few years now. And Spider-Man 2 is going to be the result of, okay, this is a game with Insomniac completely understood. And look at Insomniac's output since Sony bought them. Right? They spit out Spider-Man 2018 before they're under Sony. Right after that, Miles Morales, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, and now Spider-Man 2. I'll be honest. I think Spider-Man 2 is probably the worst example I could have used for what I'm trying to say. Let me use God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is a much better example. It would be so weird to me if God of War Ragnarok was a game that was in development for like 8 years, or how long has Starfield been in development? It's been like a decade or some shit. It's been a long time, but like 7 or 8 years, whatever. God of War Ragnarok's been in development. And then in the last year and a half, Sony, you're saying 20 years, I guess technically 20 years. Technically. 25 years. Oh, okay. I didn't know it was that long. 20 years? What the I guess so, yeah. It's been 20 years in the making. I guess I'm just saying it would be really strange to me and kind of off-putting if Sony just like walked in and they were like, yeah, we just bought this studio that made this game called God of War Ragnarok. And we're gonna release it exclusively. Sony would get all the credit. But deep down, I would know, like, Sony, you didn't make that game. It's actually no different than Final Fantasy 16 right now. Final Fantasy 16 is actually a much better example. I just played the Final Fantasy 16 demo. It's awesome. Sony had nothing to do with this game except to fund it and maybe help them optimize it a little bit. But this game is a Square game. This is a Square Enix game made by Square Enix developers and a Square Enix first-party studio. So even though it's exclusive to PlayStation 5, I could say it's a Sony game. Right? Like, oh, because it's exclusive, right? But it's not. It's just not. You're saying I'm getting it wrong. How am I getting it wrong? I'm genuinely curious. You're saying Sony sent people over to help with development. And that's like, again, that's just like with optimization. But I'm just saying, like, the core development team of Final Fantasy 16, like what this game is, not on a technical level, like it's running well on the PS5 because Sony wanted, they assured them, like, we'll help you get the game running on the PS5 and optimize it. But Sony didn't make any design decisions or gameplay decisions or story decisions, nothing. Character decisions, art style, nothing. The development team that made Final Fantasy 16 is not Sony's. It's Square's. And if Sony were to if Sony announced today that they acquired Square Enix and they own them now, then all the credit would go to Sony when Final Fantasy 16 releases. But I would know, just as you would, Sony, you didn't make that game. You funded it, you supported it, but it doesn't work that way. And it's okay. It's okay, because that's the nature of game development, man. It's like, if you're involved in some way, then it kind of makes sense that you're going to walk away saying, like, yeah, I was part of it. I funded it. And you could argue that, right, like Top Shot has said, you could make the argument that, dude, Starfield might not exist if it wasn't for Microsoft's money. You're right. And maybe the same can be said for Final Fantasy 16. And who's to say otherwise? So I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You decide for yourself. That's where it ends. That's where the train ends, man. You decide for yourself. There are going to be people who play Final Fantasy and they say, this is a PlayStation game, dude. And then there are going to be people who play Starfield and they're going to say, this is a Microsoft game. And then there are going to be people who say, no, it's not. So I will admit, this stream went way longer than I thought it would. I won't lie about that. You could tell the last hour or so I really started to go kind of off the rails. Here's the good news, though. I have a video set to go out in 15 minutes. So this is where I'm going to end it. I think I went on for too long. Towards the end of my streams here, I start to get a little delirious, right? It's just been talking too much. My cats are now going crazy. But yeah, so just to kind of summarize very quickly, because it feels necessary to do so, the main topic of this stream, at least for the first half, and the one that's relevant to the title, Sony's apparently reportedly making a PS5 Pro. Phil Spencer just came out and said right now Microsoft has no plans to do a mid-gen refresh. So come this time next year, we could see some very interesting changes in the console landscape, and that'll be fascinating to watch. And then the second half, we kind of moved and talked about acquisitions, the industry, the whole 9 yards. But there is something. So my plan is to do another stream tomorrow, but I have a topic that I've been saving to talk about tomorrow. This is something that I'm sure some of you noticed and that you did come across, but I think it'll be pretty interesting. I think it'll make for an interesting conversation. I've noticed that there was a bit of discourse, so I won't tell you what the topic is. You'll see it tomorrow. So, but before I go, I do want to again issue a big thank you to everybody here. Everybody who donated memberships or donated super chats, gifted memberships, became members, the whole 9 yards. Thank you guys for your continued support. I really do appreciate it. We're still going strong here. Obviously keeping my content output as high as I can. Although I do think, I don't know, I have to think about whether or not I'm going to have to cut back how long these streams go for a little bit. Because there are people they've given me feedback. We're like, dude, I think your streams are a little too unfocused, and that definitely happens. The longer I go, the more unfocused it gets, and the more off the rails it gets. But that's just kind of how it goes sometimes. And other times, yeah, I start a stream jacked up on caffeine, ready to rant. We'll see what tomorrow brings. You can hear the cats meowing. They're fighting each other. All right, guys, one last favor before you head out. Please hit that like button for me. I'd really appreciate that. And I also want to give one more shout out to Devil Shooter. Devil Shooter has still been doing the timestamps for the streams. Usually gets them up within 12 hours or so of it ending. So thank you so much for doing that, man. If you see him in the comments, give him a big thank you. But that's going to do it, guys. I will catch you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.